Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, members of the public who are joining us this morning. Good morning to everyone who's joining us online. Welcome to the Joint Planning and Housing Committee and Environment and Climate Change Committee. This is our second joint committee of the term. First off, just to acknowledge that Ottawa is located on unceded and never surrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, whose culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. I'll ask the committee coordinator to do the roll call, please.
Councillor Brockington, Councillor Brown?
Here.
Councillor Curry? Here. Councillor Devine?
Here.
Councillor Dudas, Councillor Hill? I see. Councillor Johnson? Here. Councillor Kavanagh?
Present.
Councillor Kelly?
Present.
Councillor King?
Here.
Councillor Kitts? Councillor Lowe? Councillor Luloff?
Bonjour.
Councillor Tierney?
Here.
Councillor Troster? Here. Vice Chair Gower?
Here.
Vice Chair Carr? Here. Chair Menard?
Here.
And Chair Leeper, you have quorum.
Thank you very much. Members, are there any declarations of conflict of interest? I don't see any. All right. So this is a meeting, we're going to contemplate the infrastructure master plan, which is the only item on the agenda. We'll proceed as committee meetings normally do, where there will be a presentation from staff at the outset. Then we'll move into public delegations. I believe we still have 7 people who are signed up. Members will have an opportunity to ask questions of each of those delegations before we move into an opportunity to ask questions of staff before making the final vote. Before we get all of that underway, however, there are 2 technical motions which Vice Chair Gower will make.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a technical motion provided by staff. Whereas the infrastructure master plan and report were made available to the public on June 11th, 2024, and whereas comments have been received since the release of the infrastructure master plan and the need for revisions have been identified, and whereas such revisions include section 8.1.3 of document 1 incorrectly states the following: the Taywin landowners will front end the full cost of the oversized infrastructure. And document 1, schedule 3 provides mapping which illustrates the public service area, and this mapping does not accurately reflect the area specific policy, special policy area for Cedar Hill Estates, which permits connection to the municipal water service for the properties abutting the urban boundary previously known as 800 and 848 Cedarview Road and 4497 O'Keefe Court, legally defined as part of lots 22, 23, 24, and 25, concession 4, Rideau Front, former city of Nepean, and part of lot 21, concession 4, Rideau Front, former city of Nepean, being part 14 on registered plan 5R 13897, abutting the urban boundary. And document 1, section 13.4.1.2, page 193 states that the program is anticipated to be launched in 2024. And the report, document 1, provides project recommendations which potentially affect federal lands, and the associated project descriptions do not consistently identify the federal approval requirements. Therefore, be it resolved that the statement above be removed from section 8.1.3 of document 1, that document 1, schedule 3 be replaced with the attached updated version. Document 1, section 13.4.1.2, page 193 be corrected to state that the program is anticipated to be launched in 2025. And the following sentence be added to the end of section 14.2 in document 1. Any project that impacts federal land will require both a federal impact assessment process and a federal land use design and transaction approval. And there's a map attached.
Thank you very much. I know that's just dropping and is a fair number of words. Before we get underway with the presentation, could staff just take us through what those 2 items are?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. These are typos, as you would. There are a couple of modifications, as Councillor Gower has outlined to us, so they are pointed out after the publication of the infrastructure master plan within the document itself, of a very specific and technical nature. I'm looking what other type of elaboration. There is one, the first one related to Taywin, that speaks to an inconsistency of a comment with regard to oversizing compared to the rest of the document. The balance of the document indicates different than what that statement says, so it's a correction. And the others are very site-specific based on small errors. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks. If members are at all interested in finding out more, we'll have the opportunity to chat with staff after the delegations. So we'll move into the presentation. I don't know, Ms. Johns or Ms. Rose, if one of you is taking the lead on that, but the committee is in your hands.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Chair Leeper, Chair Menard, and members of Joint Committee. I'm delighted and honored to be here today to introduce our only report today, the Infrastructure Master Plan. And it's my pleasure to introduce Chris Rogers here to my right and Haran Sandanyake, who have both been involved in this for many years. Chris has been leading the IMP since the notice of commencement in November 2019. Since the official plan now has final approval, we are delighted to be here today at last to present the IMP. The IMP is a growth-focused plan for Ottawa's drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater systems, and it supports the development projections that are provided in the city's new official plan. We have an IMP now dated 2013, so this is an update going along with our new official plan. Chris is going to carry the presentation this morning and describe to you the policies, the projects, and the programs that we have encompassed in the IMP to guide infrastructure to service growth in the official plan. I'll pass it now to Chris.
Thank you, Sue. The city's growth strategy in the official plan is the main driver for the infrastructure master plan update. The official plan projects that the city's population will increase to 1.4 million by 2046. Could I have the next slide, please? With about half the growth coming from in the form of intensification in existing neighborhoods. This map shows the new expansion areas that were added to the urban boundary through approval of the new official plan. These are the pink and blue areas on the map. The yellow areas on the map were added by the province in 2022 and then removed by the province at the end of last year. Next slide, please. The purpose of the infrastructure master plan is to support the city's growth strategy by ensuring that water, wastewater, and stormwater capacities are available for development, by identifying upgrades to the backbone of the city's water and wastewater systems and informing future updates to the city's DC bylaw, setting development-focused infrastructure policies, establishing new programs to support intensification, and avoiding increases to flooding and fire risks in existing communities. Key considerations in developing the plan include the housing crisis, climate change, the creation of the new Taywin suburban area, infrastructure affordability and development charge funding of the projects recommended in the plan, as well as stakeholder consultation. Next slide. The staff report recommends that council, and I'm paraphrasing here, approve the IMP, including updated policies, capital project recommendations, the stormwater management strategy, and the proposed infrastructure capacity management program. Approve 2 permanent staff to support and run that program. Direct staff to review how the Taywin and South Urban Community water and sewer infrastructure is to be funded and sized to accommodate long-term growth. And direct staff to publish a notice of master plan to initiate a 30-day public review in accordance with the provincial class environmental assessment process. Next slide, please. There are 12 policy categories in the updated infrastructure master plan. These are focused on the provision of water-related infrastructure for new development, and they build on the infrastructure policies in the new official plan. The policies were first published for stakeholder feedback in 2022, revised and republished for further consultation in 2023, with further minor revisions made and which are reflected in the updated IMP. Next slide. Climate change is considered throughout the plan. It's a cross-cutting issue reflected in many of the IMP policies. The water and wastewater master plans were developed in consideration of potential drought conditions, extreme rainfall, major pipe or facility failures, energy efficiency, and these plans also support contingency planning for various failure scenarios. Under the stormwater management strategy, climate change informs expansion area and retrofit planning, and the strategy provides direction on the application of low-impact development measures, which represent a new approach to stormwater management that complements traditional end-of-pipe approaches. These measures involve controlling stormwater at source and sometimes is referred to as nature-based solutions. The stormwater strategy also makes recommendations regarding gaps in the city's sewer design guidelines related to potential climate impacts. The intensification chapter of the IMP includes program recommendations that will build resilience to extreme rainfall events through a new on-site stormwater management program and through overland flow management under the proposed infrastructure capacity management program. Next slide. So this is a map illustrating the water master plan. The plan consists of 20 projects that will increase backbone capacity of the distribution system. 11 of these projects were carried over from the 2013 plan, and the remaining 9 projects are new. The blue squares and lines that you see on the map represent the facilities and larger pipes in the existing water distribution system, which is supplied from the city's water purification plants at Britannia and Lemieux Island. The green lines represent major water main upgrades or extensions, and the green symbols represent new or upgraded water storage or pumping facilities. Next slide. And this map illustrates the wastewater master plan. The plan consists of 37 projects to increase backbone capacity of the collection system. 16 of these projects were carried over from the 2013 plan, and the remaining 21 are new. The red squares and lines represent the facilities and larger pipes in the existing wastewater collection system, which drains to the city's wastewater treatment plant, or ROPEC. The green lines represent major sewer upgrades or extensions. The dashed green lines represent sewage force main upgrades, and the green squares represent new or upgraded sewage pumping facilities. Next slide. The total price tag for the water and wastewater master plans in the IMP is $1.5 billion. About a third of this cost is associated with projects identified in the 2013 IMP and are covered in the existing development charges bylaw. The remaining 2/3 of the cost represents the new projects in the plan. The projects are mainly development charge funded, but many of them provide a benefit to existing development by replacing old infrastructure with new or improving service levels to existing communities, and therefore will be partly funded through the city's rate budget. Some projects have been sized to provide additional capacity beyond the 2046 requirements. The piped infrastructure has a life cycle of over 100 years, and oversizing this infrastructure is much more cost-effective than having to build additional upgrades or new pipes in another 20 years. Overall, the capital plan will be about 72% funded by development charges, 17% by rate, and the remaining 11% represents post-period capacity costs. The projects will be implemented over the planning period. Approximate implementation years have been identified for each project in the plan, but actual project timing will depend on monitoring of growth and demands in the systems. Some projects may also be front-ended by developers should they wish to proceed with a development on a timeline that does not align with the city's implementation plan. Next slide, please. About $600 million of the plan is to service the new Taywin community and plan growth in the broader South Urban community, including Leitrim, Riverside South, most of Barrhaven, as well as the village of Manotick. This infrastructure consists of about 30 kilometers of backbone pipe and a new major facility to store and pump drinking water. The program includes major upgrades to existing water mains all the way north to the Rideau River at Bank Street. The solution is conceptual in nature. As for all other projects in the IMP, where pipes and facilities go will be subject to further study. Funding is based on who benefits. About 53% of the costs are attributed to Taywin, as it is defined in the official plan. 16% is attributed to the South Urban community and will be funded by the outside Greenbelt development charges. 2% represents benefit to existing, and the remaining 29% is related to post-period capacity costs. Staff recommend that the amount of oversizing and therefore the PPC costs be reviewed through a class environmental assessment process for the recommended infrastructure. Next slide. The IMP projects need to be reflected in the city's DC bylaw. The cost of projects carried over from the 2013 plan have already been updated in last month's update to the bylaw. Costs for the new projects will be addressed in a bylaw update later this year, with the exception of the Taywin project costs. Another bylaw update is expected by the end of 2025 to reflect updates to the TMP as well as the master plan for the city's wastewater treatment plant. The preparation of both master plan updates is ongoing. A future update will also be required to address area-specific development charges for Taywin. Next slide. Unlike water and wastewater, the city has no central stormwater system. Developers are responsible for planning the major stormwater infrastructure needed to support greenfield development, so there are no stormwater capital projects in the IMP. The IMP includes a stormwater management strategy that provides a planning framework to guide future development for the expansion areas. It also provides updated direction for the city's stormwater retrofit program, which is focused on protecting local creeks and beaches and was the genesis of the city's Rain Ready Ottawa program. Key considerations in developing the strategy include provincial and official plan policy, the climate change master plan, council-approved retrofit plans for the Pinecrest, Westboro, and Eastern subwatersheds areas, and new provincial requirements for stormwater control. Existing urban flooding problems are addressed by existing city programs and will be a key consideration of the 2025 update to the city's stormwater asset management plan. Key recommendations of the strategy include master planning and floodplain mapping requirements for the new urban expansion areas, direction on the application of low-impact development in the planning of development, and new climate change considerations for stormwater system planning and design. Next slide. The IMP proposes 2 new programs to support intensification. The first is an on-site stormwater management program. Development of the plan is ongoing, and staff plan to bring a separate report to council in 2025 with recommendations on program implementation. The second program is an infrastructure capacity management program, which is recommended for implementation to support intensification planning. Staff expect to bring a future report to council on funding strategies for any local infrastructure needs that are identified under this program. Next slide. So the objective of the on-site stormwater management program is to avoid increases in flooding risk in existing communities due to intensification. The need for this program is illustrated by the image on the slide. The left side of the image is a 2015 air photo showing modest single-family homes on a street in the Westboro Beach area. The right side of the image shows the same street in 2021 after some redevelopment has taken place. The The homes on the east side of the street have been knocked down and replaced with much larger multi-unit structures. We've superimposed the footprint of the original homes over the roof lines of the new structures so you can better see the increase in hard surface on each property as a result of the redevelopment. More hard surface means more stormwater runoff, means higher flooding risks. So the requirement under the new program would be for the developer of each lot to provide on-site storage with a control to throttle the release of stormwater into the city's drainage system. The concept is the same as what is already required for developments that are subject to site plan control, which used to apply to developments involving 4 units or more, but now only applies to 10-unit projects as a result of Bill 23. Under the new program, on-site stormwater management would apply to all developments involving a net increase in hard surface area on the property. Next slide, please. We did consider alternatives to this program, supported by pilot area studies of existing neighborhoods that can expect to see significant intensification. These pilot area studies allowed us to quantify the potential impacts and evaluate the options based on extrapolation of results across the area inside the Greenbelt. If we do nothing, existing service levels will degrade, and we estimate roughly that somewhere in the order of 1,200 to 2,400 additional residential structures would be subject to flooding. We also considered municipal storm system upgrades. We estimate, again, roughly a total cost in the order of $3 billion to complete this work, which would involve roughly 600 kilometers of pipe replacement. This work would take many decades to complete and would have major construction impacts on local neighborhoods. We would also expect interim flooding impacts over the course of implementation. Furthermore, rear yard flooding impacts would not be effectively addressed through such a program. The proposed on-site stormwater management would effectively mitigate the flood risks and avoid the very high cost impact and time to upgrade the stormwater system citywide. Next slide. This image represents the planning department's vision for an intensification hub centered around light rail. This is the kind of area where local pipe networks are most likely going to need extensive water and sewer upgrades. But intensification-driven upgrades could be needed in low-rise residential areas as well. Local pipe upgrade projects are not covered by the IMP capital program and would not generally be development charge eligible. Under current programs, staff only have the opportunity to complete reactive capacity checks for development subject to site plan control, and a growing number of projects are unable to proceed due to lack of available capacity in local pipes. So the new program would include tracking allocation of capacity to development, monitoring local sewer flows and water demands, analysis of cumulative impacts of intensification on local systems, planning local systems for intensification in coordination with secondary plans where applicable, and scoping of projects for design and construction. Currently, there is no funding mechanism for intensification-driven upgrades to local pipes. Staff have completed some initial study work on funding options and are recommending that further investigation of options be carried out to support a future report to council. In the interim, financial plans for local system upgrades would be prepared in coordination with secondary planning processes. Alternatively, individual developers may choose to pay for local upgrades to meet their own needs. Without this program, there is an increased risk of development delays, basement flooding and fire impacts, inefficient and more costly one-off solution for individual developments, and unfair cost allocations. Next slide. We have carried out extensive consultation on this plan starting in 2020. We have consulted with communities, the development industry, federal and provincial agencies, First Nations, and the general public. As noted in the slide, we have communicated and consulted in many different ways on specific topics and on the plan as a whole. And many revisions to the plan were made based on the feedback received. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present a summary of the IMP.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rogers. So we can move first, before we have an opportunity to talk with staff some more, to our public delegations. And the first of those will be Angela Keller-Herzog. Ms. Keller-Herzog, you'll have 5 minutes to address the committee whenever you're ready. Don't rush.
Is there a button? Yeah, okay. So I have a visual presentation. I should tell you that I'm extremely excited to be here. There have been a lot of Environment Committee meetings this week, but I think this, I'm hoping, will be one of our most impactful public delegations ever. My name is Angela Keller-Herzog. I'm the Executive Director of Cafes. Next slide, please. We are a network of local environmental leaders known to you all. Next slide, please. Climate change is happening and has massive stormwater management impacts. Also not news to you. Next slide, please. The IMP and the stormwater management strategy, the shift to the on-site stormwater management has a really strong rationale. In the climate and intensification context. But we are seeing mostly gray infrastructure, and there is zero mention of trees and urban forest in the documentation that is in front of you. The strategy does mention low impact development, but it's not very clear, not very specific. And I should tell you that nature-based solutions and green rainwater infrastructure has a growing body of evidence and experience and practice in municipalities around the world and in other countries. Next slide, please. In terms of the cost effectiveness, there is lots and lots of data that there are massive cost savings possible by using these approaches. So this is not trivial. I don't think this is like a 1 or 2% tweak, but we're talking about like serious cost savings. And the slide there has a case study from New York City, so not trivial. Next slide, please. A well-known cost study also from Portland. Next slide, please. So this is the slide I really want to get to. Stormwater tree trenches. What are we talking about? We're talking about giving trees enough soil to thrive and prosper, either in soil cells or structural soil, and then with catchment basins and inlets for stormwater attenuation. Now, I talked to the woman who was the leader in Vancouver in their rain ready strategy, which is like a big deal for how Vancouver is managing it. And I said, like, how do you manage the shift? And she said, you have to communicate to your people that this is an engineering stormwater solution, not landscaping. Like, that's the main point to understand. In Toronto, okay, they're like 10 years ahead of us. They have complete specifications for stormwater tree trenches. Next slide, please. This slide is more about Vancouver. You can see that Vancouver has set a target to capture and treat 90% of Vancouver's annual rainfall. So again, this is not on the margin. This is like core stuff that can save us major amounts of money and have a flourishing tree canopy if we combine this. Next slide, please. So the trick is the integration between forestry, urban forestry, and stormwater management. Again, so much literature on this. Next slide, please. So where are we on this in Ottawa? Well, in 2014, we had a low impact development pilot, tiny, not much follow-up. In 2010, in the 2010s, we started to use Silva cells, for example, Gladstone reconstruction. Diane Holmes was a major leader on this. We have the Rain Ready program that was approved this year. And you go, haha, so we have like bio retention. But there's not a single tree involved in any one of those pilot sites and in that pilot rollout for Rain Ready. So again, we're not doing the integration in Ottawa. There is one single tiny stormwater tree cell pilot planned. It's planned, it's been in the plans for years, it hasn't happened yet, and it's for 2 trees. So we are just on the cusp of this huge opportunity and have not yet gone there here in Ottawa. So the zoning bylaw obviously also is a major opportunity, again, for this integration of stormwater management and green. Next slide, please. So our recommendations are to look at this both in terms of street reconstruction and stormwater retrofit, as well as in terms of the context of the zoning bylaw and on-site stormwater management, with guidance to the private sector on how this can be done. Last slide, please. So this is a PS. This is the second opportunity that cafes would like to point out to you. There is a lot of concrete and cement that's going to be involved in this $1.5 to $2 billion infrastructure plan. Cement is really carbon intensive, but Canada is a leader in innovation on decarbonization of cement. So let's try to use some green procurement tools to start lowering the carbon footprint of this whole IMP, which is a huge plan, and we want to succeed, but we can lower the footprint. Canada has the technologies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angela. Councillor Johnson has a question for you.
Thank you very much, Angela, and really succinct and powerful presentation. That was a great way to start the day. I wanted to ask if you could just help me to understand how you believe that maybe Ottawa is defining the stormwater tree trench versus how you might, or how the City of Toronto might, just so that we know when we're looking at our pilots that we're comparing apples to apples, or perhaps be able to interrogate if we're not.
So the key concept to understand is that it's an integration. So what you're trying to do is have an engineering specification and design that provides enough living space and the resources for the tree, principally water, but also allowing the root structure to go down, but then combine that with the pipes and what the stormwater guys call attenuation. So attenuation is a word that, okay, I'm not an engineer, but it means that you're building structures to slow down the water on site, right? And then they have like valves to like release it later or give it back to the tree. So the Toronto specifications for tree trenches are like crazy detailed, but that's how, I guess, engineering specifications are when you want to establish standards so you don't have to redesign for every single little project, right? So, and the main thing to understand is that there is a tendency for our departments to work in separation because it's somewhat more efficient if you don't have to talk to 50 other colleagues about your project. So it's important to keep the stormwater tree trench definition to include that engineering component and not say, oh, this is just a bunch of trees planted in a row.
Okay, thank you for that. And you will have seen that we've got an inquiry in that will help us to understand exactly where Ottawa is demonstrating its commitment to this pilot. And we'll be able to follow up with you to see what next steps might be taken to encourage it. Certainly my office, given that we lose a lot of trees to these monster homes that are described in the report quite broadly, anywhere where we can try and enhance the life of a tree or return some stormwater capacity to a neighborhood is of interest to me. So thank you.
Okay, will this inquiry be part of the public record of this meeting?
Yeah, and actually, I probably should have at the start, we don't have a section in the agenda today for inquiries because it is a joint committee meeting, but with the committee's permission, I'll accept two inquiries. And then any inquiry that is made at a committee or at council has to be answered on the public record by way of a memo to the appropriate committee. So my understanding is that Councillor Johnson has an inquiry about tree trenches, and the response to that, to the fact that she's made it, will be public record, and the response will be public record.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Don't go anywhere because Councillor Menard has, Chair Menard has a question for you.
Thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, I see a lot of questions up for you. So thank you for being here. I fully support the delegation you've made and obviously the ideas you've brought to the table, and really grateful for Councillor Johnson bringing an inquiry so we can get more information, more discussion on the topic. I know that in Ottawa, we're just kind of starting to pilot some of these pieces. I know in Glebe Avenue, there's reconstruction there, and it looks like there's a pilot nearby in front of Lansdowne, very tiny pilot in front of Lansdowne too, that'll eventually take hold. And then, of course, we have the, you know, on Sunnyside, there's the kind of the bioswales, kind of trenches, accomplishing something similar to what we're talking about, but not exactly. So I guess Ottawa's been a little bit slower to adopt these en masse in all wards, in all areas. And I guess that stormwater tree trench construction as an approach, how do you think we can improve upon our direction in the future, and why have we been a little bit slower to adopt it, do you think?
I think that it's not that there's missing specifications. It's not that there's missing knowledge. It's not that there's missing case studies, not that there's missing municipal experience, right? All of those things are readily available. And like I said, the documentation from Toronto is very easily accessible. And obviously, Toronto is operating in the same building code and in the same regulatory world. So that is not the problem. I think that I haven't seen the text of the inquiry that Councillor Johnson is putting forward. But one of the things that we should try to learn is like what exactly have been the barriers to adopting these practices, which can benefit a more thriving canopy and can benefit in stormwater management. And as we've seen with the presentation from staff, with intensification and climate change, stormwater management is a huge concern, right? Both in inner urban and in the residential area. So I think that the departments have worked in a way that certainly prevents conflict, right? We don't have forestry planting trees and then, 4 months later, infrastructure comes along and like rips up the trees and says, no, we're gonna put a pipe in here. Like that doesn't happen. I think that the departments have started to work in alignment, and we've seen work on the street cross sections and things, but what we haven't seen is actual cooperation, right? So there's a spectrum of you're not fighting, you're working in alignment, you're actually cooperating. And it's that actual cooperation that we haven't seen. And I think that some of the barriers are, it's not because people don't want to work together, but it can also be the financial structuration, right? Because forestry gets its money from the tax budget, right? A lot of the infrastructure comes out of the rate budget. So then how do you put the two together? Can you use development charges to start like putting in tree trenches, right? Is that a thing? So I think that there are these sort of bureaucratic, how we operate business efficiency improvements that we could do. And then I think the outcome will be like cost savings and a better canopy.
Thanks for that. And yeah, I know staff care about this issue. And in my discussions with them, they've been certainly forthright in trying to move these projects forward within the ward that I represent. But I know there's more to be done citywide, and just appreciate the dialogue. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair. Angela, you deserve an office at City Hall. Always very glad to hear you. Your delegation here, as Councillor Johnson just said, a really great delegation to start off, but it's a good reminder of when we had the discussion on the at Audit Committee last week about the audit on the Climate Change Master Plan, about an emphasis on renewing and invigorating community-based, community stakeholder involvement in the implementation of the CCMP. So thank you very much for being here. I very much appreciate what you just brought up there about the stormwater tree trenches. It reminds me of a desire to see integration and aligned visions between the infrastructure master plan, along with the implementation of the climate change master plan, along with the implementation of the urban forestry master plan. And I'm not always sure about whether or not that alignment of visions is part of the conversations from the leadership team of that. but I wouldn't mind asking you, because Councillor Johnson and I have a fantastic opportunity over the next many years about the development of a secondary plan for what we hope to be the revitalization of Merivale Road. And all of that is up for grabs. What we hope will be a revitalized Merivale that will be a very, very dense area. In your understanding of stormwater tree trenches, is that the kind of thing that could be well suited for like a major arterial road like Merivale?
Yes, absolutely.
I thought that would be your answer. Good. And then just my last comment. I know you ran out of time when you were talking about the green cement, green procurement, but with the will of council, I'll be bringing an inquiry to speak to that as well during today's meeting. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I know that the balance of my presentation was on the stormwater tree trenches. We've been working and pushing on that for well over a year. And in some ways, the delay in the IMP has worked in our favor because we've learned more, we've researched more in that time. But the opportunity on the lower carbon footprint cement, using green procurement, maybe learning from the federal government as well, and working with industry on that innovation front, is, again, it's a huge opportunity. And it would be really marvelous if we can kind of thread the needle with this big IMP in terms of like bumping forward Ottawa's practice on that. It's a huge opportunity.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. Vice Chair Carr?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks again, Angela, for always being here. It's, I feel like I see you a lot. I always try as a councillor to bring a bit more profile to the Alta Vista ward, and well, it was really nice to see some of the pictures in your presentation today. I do note that at least 2 of them are from my ward of the flooding. You know, given the time at which most of my ward was built, you know, where both homes and city infrastructure were built to the standard of the time, events such as August 10th of last year result in flooding in sanitary sewers, storm sewers, and overland drainage. And so combined with the tree loss that I've experienced in that ward due to the sort of the trifecta of development, tree disease, and storms, I'm in a position that kind of has placed me as number 1 in floods over the last year. But I was really excited to read in the infrastructure master plan about the plans for the stormwater management strategy and the intensification servicing plan, and listening to you speak, you know, give, you know, lots of ideas and possible innovations. And I'm just wondering if, what I didn't hear in your delegation was if you see anything in the infrastructure master plan presently that would prevent anything, any of your suggestions from going forward, or you're more just speaking about how you'd like to see things be developed as we implement all the strategies and plans. Is there anything that you see in the infrastructure master plan that would stop any of these technologies or any concerns you have? Like, your delegation was not about, you're talking about how we implement and things for consideration. You don't have any concerns with the documentation as is, correct?
So I think that there is a lot of like amazing work in the IMP. It's complex, and there is an ambition for a lot of systems change in how we do things, like looking at the stormwater management on-site approaches in terms of measuring the permeability changes. Those are like sort of regime changes in stormwater management and how we relate to our residents. So, and the fact that the plan really does take on board that we are seeing climate change, we know the numbers, we have the projections, and that we're planning for it, that is amazing. And I would hate to be here making the same publication saying, you know, wake up, stormwater engineers, we've got climate change coming. Like, you've had your head down on your engineering specs, but you haven't been looking at what's happening in terms of the forecast. And that's not the case. So I think actually this is like excellent, excellent work. And the things that I'm proposing are very much like compatible And so I guess the only one thing I'd like to say is that sometimes there's a feeling that the city of Ottawa lags behind the city of Toronto. So why can't we kind of copy and adapt and sort of appropriate stuff from them, not with a 10-year lag, but like maybe the next year. So maybe we need like a staff to kind of keep an eye on Toronto.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thanks. That's what I took from your delegation, that I found it very hopeful. So, and in light of what I read. So thank you for coming out.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Councillor Kavanagh? We'll give Teresa a moment here. So I think Councillor Kavanagh has disconnected herself. If it's okay with the committee, I'll move on. Angela, thank you very much for your presentation today. Actually, very inspiring.
Oh, sorry about that.
Oh, Angela, can you come back?
My hand bumped the wrong button. I'm sorry about that, to delay you. I just wanted to say thank you to Angela. I really like the idea of the stormwater or rainwater tree trenches. And I see this as over and above what we're doing. And I think that's kind of what you said in your last comments. But my issue has been, whenever we've been wanting trees placed somewhere, it is a huge thing. So I take it this can only be done when there's ongoing projects, such as, we're going to tear up the street anyway, and that kind of stuff. I've had some examples of that in communities, but it's not something you can do ad hoc, that it has to be done with major projects. And, I haven't read up on the literature, but I imagine that's what's happening in the other cities that, that are well ahead of us.
I think that in terms of getting the practice and the cost down, obviously the major street reconstructions offer a great opportunity, right? But there's also the right of way. So I think that one could imagine having sort of the technical specifications for like 3 different sort of hydrological scenarios. So if you have a residential street that is extremely prone to flooding, where the absorptive capacity of the street, which is intended to be like a temporary water holding instrument, right? If that's not enough, and there's factors in terms of topography or whatever that make that residential area super like overland flood prone, then I think that it would be very easy to say, okay, the streetscape tree planting on the right of way, boom, go into the tree trench mode, and combine the tree in terms of giving adequate soil volume, which is more absorption, with, again, the engineering infrastructure underneath for the stormwater attenuation. So I can see that if we get better at this in the city of Ottawa so that it becomes more cookie cutter, this wouldn't just be for the major street reconstruction. And last point, and this is, again, it's hugely important, the zoning bylaw that we're all working on, and that is another big game changer project that the city's embarked on. We have advances there. We have proper soil volume requirements. We have setbacks for trees. So then from the developer perspective, there are stormwater requirements, right? So the developers want to know, like, hey, can we use the same like square meterage here for having our soil volume requirement and doing our stormwater management? Like, wouldn't that be very efficient and massively cost saving? So there's like a whole other application on private land for this idea that you can integrate urban trees and engineering on the stormwater management side.
This may be too technical You're not an engineer, you've already pointed that out, but is this just for where we have an existing stormwater system? Because we have so many areas with ditches.
I think the answer is yes, but I would welcome, of course, if you could direct that question to staff.
I will. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kavanagh. Angela, thank you. We'll move on to Neil Saravanamuthu, who will be followed by Pamela O'Donnell, and we have added one additional delegate as well who had previously asked to speak but was missed. So, Neil, you have 5 minutes to make a presentation to the committee whenever you're ready.
Great, thanks very much, Chair. And I have a presentation, if you can bring that up, please. So I'm very excited to be here too, and I'd like to think that I'm here speaking on behalf of taxpayers across the city. I'd like to specifically zone in on the issue of Taywin. That's all I want to talk about with the infrastructure master plan, and really this question of does Taywin pay for Taywin, because that's what we've been promised. And I'd like to point out 3 ways in which I believe that's actually not the case. So first up is if we look at the water costs. So you know, we know $600 million to get water and sewer down there, of which about $400 million is for the existing approved Taywin, and then the rest is for, you know, future capacity for areas outside the urban boundaries. So 408 million for 7,100 homes, that's what we get in the yellow area, equals about $57,000 per home. Now, if you can move to the next slide, please. The reason I bring this up is that would imply a very large development charge for Taywin, $103,000. If you look at on the left, I've got the outside the Greenbelt DC, and if you extract the water and sewer, you're left with another $45,000 in costs that need to be compensated. So all that to say is that when the discussion comes to talk about development charges, if that development charge is less than $103,000, taxpayers are making up the difference. Next slide, please. The second area where I think that taxpayers are paying for, are subsidizing Taywin is the $170 million for future capacity. So we know that taxpayers, or at least according to the documentation, will be paying for this over at least the next 2 decades. Now, if that urban boundary is expanded, there's a possibility post-2046 that future home buyers would pay that back. But we have no guarantee that's going to happen, and what we know for sure is that all of us, all taxpayers, are going to be on the hook for the next 2 decades. Maybe our kids or our grandkids will get paid back, but that's no guarantee. Next slide, please. The third issue is that development charges cover infrastructure and services for the first 10 years of a project. After that, we know that developments outside the Greenbelt incur a cost of $465 per person per year. So if we look at Taywin at its full capacity, we look at it at its current capacity, at its proposed capacity with the approved lands, 16,000 residents would equal $8 million a year. So $8 million a year, we will all be subsidizing Taywin. Next slide, please. Now, if we moved, if the urban boundary is expanded and Taywin is developed to its full capacity, that would be 92,000 residents. So that would be $43 million a year in eternity that we would be subsidizing this development. And so let's just think about $43 million a year. That's about a 2% property tax increase. So voting for Taywin to expand it beyond the urban boundary is equivalent to voting for a 2% tax increase in the future. Next slide, please. And I want to look at this in the context of what the profit potential is here. If we look at the approved Taywin lands, and these are conservative estimates, the profit potential is probably somewhere in the $700 million range. If we look at expanding the urban boundary, that profit potential is somewhere in the $4 billion range, $4 billion. Now, I have no problem with profit. You know, anyone that takes risk should be rewarded accordingly. I just want to make that point abundantly clear. But if you can turn to the next slide, the question is, why would taxpayers be subsidizing $4 billion in profits? And again, just to reiterate, taxpayers will pay if those DCs are less than $103,000 a year. Taxpayers will pay that $170 million in the future, and maybe our grandkids will get it paid back, but we will be paying that. Number 3, there's going to be this permanent subsidy of $43 million a year, a 2% tax increase, starting sometime in the future. So I think it's My analysis is that Taywin does not pay for Taywin. And we have to recognize that there are alternatives for meeting our housing needs. There's alternatives through intensification within the existing urban boundary. There's all sorts of federal and provincial lands that are starting to come on stream that we can take advantage of. So what I would like to see and what I would recommend for this committee is that we take the Taywin proposal out of the IMP and consider it separately. The rest of the IMP, I would suggest that you go ahead and debate and move forward on. But Taywin, let's pull it out and let's have a full discussion on what this costs and who's actually paying for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vanwutu. Chair Menard.
Thanks very much, Chair. Just on the cost of this expansion versus, say, other expansion in the urban boundary, I think you've seen the difference in the infrastructure master plan. Would you characterize this as the most expensive expansion we could do, given the other areas that were considered?
Yeah, so this is the most expensive expansion we can do, and we've got the approved section, and then we've got the approved section, which is already extremely expensive. I mean, $57,000 per home to bring in water and sewer, versus a much lower cost anywhere else in the city.
Thank you very much. I don't see any further questions for you, Neil. Thank you very much for the presentation today. And so we'll move on to Pamela O'Donnell. I'm not sure.
All right, thank you.
She got him. Okay. Good afternoon, Ms. O'Donnell. You have 5 minutes to present to the committee whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate the previous presenter who's raised some points that I'm concerned about. So I'm a resident of Carlsbad Springs, and I have major concerns over the way Taywin has been presented and approved. I am disturbed that at every step, it appears we're being misled or even lied to. And I just want to recap what has happened so far. City planners advised against Taywin with concerns which included the lack of infrastructure in the area. It received 0 points compared to the other areas being considered for urban expansion. City Council made the decision to proceed without any consultation with citizens and before any of the studies were completed. They voted not to wait until more information was received. Councillors and citizens were told that Taywin would pay for Taywin, yet here we are considering $590 million from the city budget for the water infrastructure alone. We were told it would be an environmentally friendly development, yet Taggart and AOO clear-cut approximately 70 hectares just next to the new urban boundary. Again, no consultation. In fact, they tried to hide their actions, including cutting at night. When first asked, they said they were cleaning up from the derecho, and then that the trees on private land posed a safety hazard. Finally changing the story to say they were preparing the land for farming. And the lease for farming was signed weeks after the clear cutting had taken place. Farming is a legitimate exemption in the tree cutting bylaw, but it should not permit developers to pretend to be farmers when they get caught clear cutting. The bylaw allows for tree removal as part of a normal farm practice carried out as part of an agricultural operation by a farming business. Neither Taggart nor AOO are a farming business.
Ms. O'Donnell,
Yes?
if I could ask you to stick to the subject of the infrastructure master plan, please.
It is relevant. I'm getting there. So all of this clear cutting took place on land adjacent to the approved Taywin area with no considered environmental impact. And this impacts the environmental assessment that is still ongoing. We know that the developers wanted that land as part of Taywin, and I'm sure they will be back years down the road to argue that the urban boundary should again be extended to include it. And they will argue that there are no trees or biodiversity to protect on the land. This is relevant to the discussion of the costs. Discussions being made on Taywin go against the city's stated objectives to address the climate emergency because urban sprawl and clear-cutting forests are not the answer. And it's not just me that are concerned, the Auditor General raised concern as well. So none of this adds up to confidence that good decisions are being made. Trust in the process and the developer are gone. With this history, residents are very worried about the future and how it will impact citizens. The interests of the developers should not trump those of ordinary citizens. It is not just residents of Carlsbad Springs that will feel the impact, but all Ottawa taxpayers, as the previous presenter pointed out. The infrastructure spending being discussed today is just the tip of the iceberg. The very high cost does not even include expenses related to transit, new roads, or energy. Many decisions are being taken prior to the various studies being completed. Until we know what all the costs are and all the impacts, environmental and other, we should not be moving forward to commit money. We don't yet know what this community will look like. Residents have raised concerns about traffic, water, protection of wetlands, and impact on wildlife, to name a few. We need to see the development plan, the EIA, and the hydrology modeling of wetlands and Leda clay construction in order to understand what is possible and the impact on existing residents. For example, if we pave over the area, where's all the water going to go? My basement already floods every year. Residents are asking many questions as part of the EIA and recent community consultation. The answer is usually, it is too early to answer that. If it is too early to answer the most basic questions, then it is too early for the city to commit $590 million from its budget. I am here today to ask you to resist committing any money to Tailwind, nor allowing any further irreversible actions until you have the full picture. The necessary studies should be done and a cost-benefit analysis considered before taking further decisions. In these days of scarce resources, value for money is extremely important to the citizens of Ottawa, and you owe it to the taxpayers to get all the facts before any spending starts. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. O'Donnell. I know members will have questions about what approval of this IMP, if it moves forward, represents in terms of a commitment to fund and how that would be funded. So I see Ms. Jasmine is here and our staff as well. So I don't see any questions for you. Thank you very much for your presentation today. We're going to move to Monica Brewer. Good morning, Monica. Whenever you're ready, we have 5 minutes to make a presentation to the committee.
Thank you for the opportunity to address all of you. I am here as part of cafes, but on the Tailwind proposal only. Next slide. Cafes, you know from meeting with Angela what it is. The next slide. I live where that star is in the middle of the Tailwind development. And I am here to discuss the cost, but also all the other things that Pam and Neil have pointed out beforehand. Next slide. So again, we're looking here. At this time I brought the table so you can see it, $590 million. It's a huge amount of money. My calculations, Tailwind will immediately pay for 53%. We're going to try to get development charges on quite a bit of the rest. There's still a huge amount that will have to be collected after 2046. This is a huge investment. I can't believe there's only 7 delegations here for you today. This is close to a $2 billion contract. It is a huge thing for Ottawa, and people should be concerned. People should be asking questions, just like we are today. The next slide, please. I am concerned if we're going to do these investments, what is going to happen to the tax implications for the local people like myself and for all of the residents of the city? We have to ask these questions. What is the cost of future maintenance? Not just the capital, but the maintenance of all of this. It's huge. The developer doesn't seem to be paying because by virtue of building this infrastructure to service Tailwind, we're getting so much more sprawl. We're going to have to recoup hundreds of millions of dollars. And how we're going to do this? Well, we're going to go and get more and more development. There's going to be a 4th satellite, huge city outside of the core. We're going to go back to the 1960s where there's a core city and then these little satellite communities, all of them in traffic trying to get to the center. This is against all the things that are on the official plan, all the things that we discussed in climate change. This does not make sense. This is going to force sprawl because once you've got the pipes, the developers will come. The other thing is that the population right now that is going to serve is 16,000. It might go up to 45,000. When we look at 100,000, these are people outside of Tewan. These are not sustainable communities. These are not necessarily going to be even 15-minute communities. These are just going to be developers putting huge amount of people and cement outside. I live on wetlands. Just like Pamela said, we have sump pumps going all the time. These wetlands are like a sponge for Ottawa. They absorb the water. They're very important. They're around the Greenbelt. If we pave this whole area south of the Greenbelt, we're going to pay for it in huge costs, in future problems with climate change and with flooding and with all sorts of other things that we can't even predict. Next slide. I think we should do the following. I think the infrastructure master plan is a very good document and should be approved, however, the Tewan development not. Please, this has to be studied, this has to be voted separately, this has to be much more looked at from a higher perspective on the impacts of this. I think that if you look at Annex 10 of the motion that extended the urban boundary at the last moment to include 445 acres of land that was never supposed to have been considered, then we need to finish these studies. Just like Pamela said, none of this is public. I have been passionate about this because it's so important to me. And I must say, I read and I go to every meeting. I've met with engineers, with councillors, and with the developers. And there's still thousands of questions that I can tell you are not answered on this project. We need a value for money sprint audit. Please do this. Please find out what Neil presented. Go and get somebody else, get a third and a fourth opinion, because we're going to be in huge amount of debt because of this. Do not approve the secondary plan for Tewan until we have a good exam of everything that's in it. Next slide. Thank you for your considerations and for listening to me. Thank you very much.
Ms. O'Donnell, thank you very much for the presentation. I'm just looking to see if members have questions for you. And I don't see any. Thank you very much for coming out today. Sharon Katz will be next, who will be followed by Valerie Taggart. Good morning, Sharon. You have 5 minutes to make a presentation to the committee whenever you're ready.
Good morning. My name is Sharon Katz, and I would like to start by saying that I agree with the previous presentations regarding the Tewan and the problems with it. And I support the position set out in the press release by Horizon Ottawa on behalf of a number of community groups regarding the Tewan proposal. The huge cost to city taxpayers of the proposed infrastructure for Tewan is not reasonable. Financially, the city was lured into considering the proposal with the claim that Tewan would pay for Tewan. Now we are learning that what that is not exactly what it sounded like. I would like to suggest that Tewan has had a pattern of not dealing with the city in good faith, including cutting down a forest in the middle of the night over several nights without seeking a city permit, and then claiming that it was okay because the land was going to be used for agriculture. I suggest that the agriculture exception was probably in the bylaw so that a farmer wouldn't have to go through a big bureaucratic process just to cut down 1 or 2 trees on their farm. My guess is that it wasn't intended to provide a loophole to cut down a whole forest. With respect to the land for the proposed development, I understand that there are environmental studies of the area which haven't been completed. I have heard from some people that live in the area, and you've just heard too now, that the area is prone to flooding. The proposed Tewan development would likely make the situation worse, particularly at a time when climate change is happening. I submit that the city should wait until all such studies are completed before deciding whether to commit to this project and the infrastructure payments. Finally, I note that Horizon Ottawa's research into campaign contributions in the last municipal election revealed that individuals connected to the Taggart Group collectively
just gonna-
donated over $70,000
Sharon, I'll
to
just ask you
various
to keep it
candidates.
to, Sharon, I'll just ask you to keep it to the report in front of us on the IMP. I appreciate you being here, but I'll just ask you to keep it to the report in front of us today. Thank you.
I consider that councillors who were recipients of these large donations should recuse themselves from votes that benefit the Taywin proposal. Thank you.
Thank you for your delegation. I'm going to see if there's any questions from committee members. I'm not seeing any this time. I appreciate you being here, and I know there'll be questions to staff on Taywin and other matters of the IMP. Thank you. I believe our next delegation, let me just see, it might have Chair Leapers. Can clerks just let me know who the next delegation is?
Valerie Taggart.
Valerie Taggart, please. Thanks very much.
She doesn't appear to be on the call, Chair.
Okay, we'll wait to see if she's back later after the next delegation. Our next delegation is Mo Garahan, the Executive Director of Just Food. And we'll just see if Mo can be let in. Mo, I believe you're on the call.
Hi, folks. Can you hear me?
We can. You've got 5 minutes to delegate. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. My name is Mo Garahan, and I'm speaking here today not only as the Executive Director of Just Food, but also drawing on my experience of over 30 years in Ottawa in various capacities within our social, health, and community sectors. So every one of those 30 years, I have watched close to and now over 100 community nonprofit agencies appeal to the city's committee dealing with community and social services for an increase in funding to do the bare minimum to deal with the needs factually identified, noting every single year funding approved by council has fallen severely short, leaving our sector ill-equipped to cope with community needs. In recent years of compounding crises stemming from the pandemic, soaring inflation rates, and a steadily growing population, this is now beyond critical. Since 2018, there's been a 23% inflation rate and 11% population increase, combining to create an intense strain on an already overburdened system. This is looping around to today's item. The annual 2% COLA increase has not been enough to meet these increasing pressures. The city has to increase funding by $9 million in the 2025 budget alone to address the baseline increases so that our sector can simply get our head above water. Statistics Canada has forecasted a sustained annual population growth of 5% per year, and that should lead us all to be quite concerned about what is to come given this shortfall. But it is even more complex than this. In addition, among Ottawa's existing population, we've seen a growth of 22% in seniors from 75 to 84 years old, and a major increase in newcomers to Canada arriving to make their home here in Ottawa. The current ongoing community safety and well-being plan is documenting the serious level of complex needs affecting youth, people with disabilities, and diverse communities across Ottawa. With my Just Food hat on, Ottawa Public Health has mapped the serious rise in food insecurity in Ottawa year after year. This is not about supporting food banking. The entire sector is unanimous in our analysis that food banking must be replaced with long-term basic income solutions indexed to cost of living, in addition to investment into infrastructure and solutions by the city to support meal preparation for children in our schools, through our seniors in our neighborhoods, investment into resident food production to meet current needs of thousands of residents who want to grow food to their household, and this is under your deliberation right now. We need the city to invest into emergency planning, noting we still don't have an emergency plan dealing with food security that includes compensation to community agencies for their emergency responses, similar to what is provided to police, fire services, and hydro. So I say this because I do trust that City Council shares our community sector's enthusiastic welcome for new Canadians, our honoring of seniors, and our deep desire to equip children and youth with a supported start in life. However, your budget deliberations year after year are not indicating this. I'm watching today's request to support development for the absolute highest cost of housing at a time when we clearly need to invest in more affordable housing and infrastructure costs to our city to create affordable housing for residents. I'm seeing today a request for council to take on a community debt of $169 million to invest in speculative urban expansion that primarily benefits the private sector, leading to perpetual urban sprawl when it's been clearly shown that required housing targets can be met through intensification within our previous urban boundary. $169 million of debt on water alone into speculative urban expansion. Imagine what change this could make if this was invested with the interest going to community and social services. 5% of that $160 million equals $9 million a year. It is shocking that at the same time that we hear there is no money within your CSSD committee to increase funding this year to meet urgent community needs, that this amount of funding is being deliberated today. So my ask today is not only for you to vote against the Taywin plan until detailed and comprehensive answers can be provided about the full costs, which I trust will lead to a more sober deliberation showing that this is no way to build housing in Ottawa. But today's ask is also that City Council bring an equity lens to your overall deliberations, requiring a community economic development approach to our collective budget in Ottawa that will invest proportionately into our community and social sector and create investment mechanisms, including but not limited to higher percentages of development charges that invest every year into community services required. We simply do not believe that there is no money. We believe you are making a choice to take funds from our urgent collective needs to pay for completely unnecessary infrastructure. We believe that equitably balancing the budget is a decision that you can and need to make. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gerhan. I don't see any questions for you. So thank you very much. We're going to move on to our final delegation today, who is Sam Hirsch. Good morning, Mr. Hirsch. You have 5 minutes to address the committee whenever you're ready.
Chair. Thanks. I want to start by quoting one of the introductory paragraphs for the IMP on the city website on Engage Ottawa. Quote, a key focus of the IMP will include developing strategies and programs aimed at managing infrastructure capacity to support increasing rates of intensification. Projects will be identified in order to achieve expected levels of service for community infrastructure while being socially, environmentally, and economically conscious of our water resources and assisting to implement the city's climate change strategies. Taywin doesn't do this. Another one of the city's approved documents, the official plan, as I'm sure you all know it, says, quote, intensification is a concept embraced by the new official plan to indicate new development or redevelopment within existing areas of the city, end quote. The lands that surround Taywin were barely within city limits when the OP was written. Now, all of you around this table know this. After what I presume have been countless hours of reading these documents, you know that intensification is a primary objective of the official plan document and the city's climate priorities. Then why would any of you support the proposed $600 million in spending today on Taywin that accounts for 1/3 of the entire IMP? Spending that doesn't even include costs for transportation, infrastructure, energy, life cycle costs, and a whole lot more that will go into the billions of dollars. Spending with very little evidence that it will pay off for the residents of the city, and spending that would surely go against our priorities on climate change, stretching city services to the absolute brink, creating what is essentially a whole new city on a gamble that 93,000 residents might live there in 75 years because developers say so. Taggart also promised they wouldn't clear-cut trees just outside the urban boundary, but just happened to do so on land that they would stand to benefit on because of the derecho. Taywin might make financial sense for Taggart's billion-dollar land value, but it doesn't make financial sense for the city. To quote Paul Johannes in a press release we sent out just before this committee meeting yesterday, we being Horizon Ottawa and a bunch of other groups, including the Green Space Alliance, which Mr. Johannes is a part of. Quote, in the end, the approved urban expansion will only supply 25,000 of the 182,000 new dwellings required in the urban area. This is a huge infrastructure bill for such a small incremental gain in housing. Developers and the representatives like GOBA's Jason Bergaff might talk a big game about upping housing supply and more intensification, but supporting projects like Taywin and the immense amount of money it will cost to add completely new services to an area which frankly should not be developed anyways will only exacerbate the housing crisis as well as plunge the city further and further into debt. With overhead costs this high to develop here, how do we expect any of the housing here to contribute to mitigating the affordability crisis? And then what will the industry do once their development charges go up? They'll turn to the city and yell and scream about higher development charges while continuously advocating for an expansion of the urban boundary, a problem of their own making. This is a development that is admired in controversy and for good reason. The only way something like this would have made it through to this stage is as a result of significant lobbying and influence from campaign contributors, and now residents across the city are on the hook for a decision that will cost us billions of dollars over time. But today you have a choice to start to change that and start to rethink last council's decision. Committee, as other delegates have already advocated for, committee should vote to split up the full costs here today and vote against the spend on Taywin and to allow staff more time to study it and the environmental impacts. Opposing Taywin spending today does not mean you oppose more housing, but means that you support official city plans that you in fact voted to approve. It also means that you support more responsible spending and spending on city resources that actually needed, as the last delegate spoke about so eloquently. It's frankly insulting that council continues to allow our transit system to be in $50+ million in debt, only spend $30 million on our affordable housing budget, and underspends on things like our public works department that helps mitigating the effects of climate change. That's in a $37 million deficit, all while approving a gift to Taggart that will cost hundreds of millions of dollars in operational and maintenance and renewal costs in the years to come, not to mention the negative effects of urban sprawl that are difficult to fully quantify. I've spoken to those who lead on things like community resource centers or community health centers and youth that are struggling in the city. They need spending right now and a plan to increase spending on them in the years ahead. The Centerdown Community Health Center had to fundraise to keep their trans health program going. Our libraries can't even stay open on Sundays, yet we are spending not millions, but eventually billions on a development that staff themselves earlier opposed, but now, for whatever reason, support. Councillors, if you truly care about making life more affordable for residents, if you care about the term of council priorities and the principles of the official plan, you'll find a way to vote to split up this report today and vote for the responsible choice and vote to halt this spending for Taywin, because we know that Taywin will not pay for Taywin. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hirsch, Councillor Johnson has a question for you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Hirsch. So, I mean, one could assume, I'm sure you know that council voted to put Taywin in last time, right? So in your estimation, would you imagine the reason staff went ahead and supported it is because it is part of the official plan and now they've been asked to implement the official plan?
Well, I mean, I can't speak for staff. I don't know specifically what they're thinking, but I mean, I would say that, you know, like we should take into consideration their earlier opposition to it for, you know, the reasons that I outlined. You know, I think it's important to note that, you know, it essentially, you know, it goes against a lot of the main principles of our climate change master plan, official plan, energy evolution, and, you know, a host of other city plans. And I would even posit further that if there was a way later in I'm not saying exactly right now, but later in the term or later in the year to try and take Taywin out of the urban boundary, I would say that would be wise, not only to follow city plans, but also, you know, for residents across this city, because it, as I said, it, and as other delegates have said, it puts people on residents across the city on the hook for potentially billions of dollars, and will continue this pattern of endless sprawl that I think a lot of people across this table, like I'm assuming yourself, Councillor Johnson, oppose. So thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, certainly the decision was made by council, and it is the will of council that directs staff behavior or staff actions following. So I just wanted to be sure that we weren't putting the onus on staff for a council decision. So thank you for your response.
Sure.
All right, I don't see any further questions for you. Thank you very much, Mr. Hirsch.
Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, that is, I believe, the end of our public delegation list. So we'll move on to questions of staff. But before we do, Chair Menard, Chair Menard has a motion that he's able to put on the table now.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Chair, and thanks to staff for working on this language. Be it resolved that the following additional recommendation be added to the report. 1BI, that the environmental assessment in respect of the water feeder main that would service the Taywin lands and the South Urban community analyze as an option the possibility that the Taywin development does not proceed. And it's related to the South Urban community connection with the current Taywin infrastructure. So it's helpful that staff have proposed the language and appreciate consideration of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And obviously, members will have an opportunity to ask questions about that over the course of the next little bit. I would ask to make sure that that motion is circulated to members and to the mayor's office. Thank you. So we'll move to questions of staff. Councillor Troster.
Thank you so much, Chair. So for those of us who are councillors who were not here when Taywin was voted on and may have opinions either way, my question is, if Taywin is in the official plan, is there any option for council to not fund the infrastructure that goes there? Like, I'm just struggling with whether there's any further decision to be made on Taywin, or whether the fact that it's in the official plan means that it's getting funded no matter what. Like, what are council's options now that Taywin was placed in the official plan last term? Are there any opportunities to backtrack, or is it a done deal?
Mr. Chair, at this meeting, dealing with this item, Taywin is in the official plan and so needs to be dealt with on that basis. At a subsequent opportunity in a different form, a councillor could bring forward a motion to direct staff to bring forward an official plan amendment that would change the situation, but not today, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and I guess my next question is, in regard to Councillor Menard's motion, with separating out the costs associated with Taywin, with that, I mean, there's no shovels in the ground for the project at that point, so I'm just wondering, like, how much time, in your estimation, would that be would that be offering more time to council to reconsider Taywin?
Mr. Chair, the motion as presented is a small incremental piece of work to an environmental study that will be executed anyway, that is based on the consideration of options. It will add an option to that consideration. The environmental assessment outcome would be presented to council in due course.
Okay, so it would allow us to consider the environmental impact of Taywin separately when it comes to water service.
Mr. Chair, as it relates to the infrastructure that we're speaking about in the motion, which is the water main, the comparative costs and benefits of several options, including one which would exclude, that would come to council.
Thank you very much, Councillor Troster. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I have a few questions about the not Taywin parts of the infrastructure master plan, because I'm very excited about the infrastructure master plan for our mature neighborhoods. I think that it really highlights the deficits that we have currently to managing our stormwater and the risks posed by intensification that the official plan presumes and has solutions. Yahoo! That's fabulous. I'm so excited to be able to go back to my residents and say all of your observations on some of the vulnerabilities that you see are being proposed to be resolved through some of the actions in this infrastructure master plan. So I just want to say I'm so excited that we're here today. So firstly, I just wanted to understand with the role of the new FTEs that are proposed. They are going to be going out and looking at infrastructure capacity management. Would that also include proactive ditch maintenance? Back to basics, guys.
We're back to the ditches.
Oh, sorry.
There was a motion passed at the time of the official plan directing staff to undertake investigations of ditch serviced areas to make sure that they are in a state that would support intensification going forward. So that work is ongoing.
Yes, certainly. So we have one of those ditch mitigation strategies happening in City View right now. But my question is, with respect to the way that you're imagining the infrastructure capacity management program, like if you were going to be going out and looking at project-based swaths of these mature neighborhoods, would that person also feed back regular ditch maintenance vulnerabilities that they see? Like, I'm just thinking, how many times will we have eyes on the ground in a proactive way to look at ditch maintenance? Can we leverage these new investments to talk to Public Works and homeowners to say, you got to shape up here?
Thank you, Chair. The simple answer is no, not with those two FTEs. They are going to be responsible for building programs and tools and processes that we don't currently have. There is, I will just point out, there is an internal working group on this very matter that is multi-departmental to look at the state of ditches, and that's beyond what Chris just mentioned about the studies that we're doing in water resources to look at restoring and renewing ditch systems. So that's a separate activity that's looking at condition of ditches.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I'm on that sponsor group too, so I'll be thrilled to speak about it then. Could you tell me more about when you talk on page 156 that the stress test analysis that justifies the update, what is a sewer design guideline, and how will updating your sewer design guidelines help some of these more vulnerable mature neighborhood areas?
Thank you, Chair. The stress test, there's already a stress test in the sewer design guidelines, so if I just to explain that very, very briefly, we look at normal non-climate change considerations for the initial sizing of infrastructure, but then the design guidelines ask the proponent, the developer in most cases, to look at the system impacts of that design and then stress the system with additional intensity of rainfall and then determine whether a building's going to flood either by underground basement backup or overland, and then make adjustments to the design so that wouldn't happen if the stress test fails. Some of the things that we will be looking at going forward is further integration of climate change into design guidelines in particular, and this is where we have integration between the infrastructure master plan and the climate change risk and vulnerability assessments that we've done as part of the infrastructure master plan, and the work done under the climate change master plan. Sorry, I'm naming a whole bunch of things, but we are looking at now going the next step and saying, well, what else in part of our design guidelines? That there's parts that are working very well. We see that in new neighborhoods, but now we're looking at end-of-pipe facilities and other conditions that might not be properly addressed in the current design guidelines.
Okay, that's very exciting. And just one more question, please, Mr. Chair. So, and just to go back to the infrastructure capacity program findings leading to potential project upgrades. So these two FTEs that are doing these pieces. So I read a little bit that there's potentially going to be a per unit charge that could be coming through in the next little while. Is that, are you doing these project upgrade analyses exclusively alongside secondary planning processes so that these per unit charges are happening to developers only in the future? Or is it possible that there are existing developments or existing plans that might be seeing a per unit charge sooner rather than later that they don't have anticipated in their pro formas? I just want to understand what they can foresee.
Thank you, Chair. Any kind of per unit charge would be determined through further study, and we would be bringing a report to council. So no surprises for anything that's in play now. There is opportunity to upgrade infrastructure through secondary planning processes where there's a financial plan that comes along with that involves, identification of upgrades, and then developers always have the option of paying for upgrades themselves if they need those upgrades to support their particular development.
Thank you very much, Councillor Johnson. Vice Chair Gower.
Thanks, Chair. I've got a few things in no particular order. I was hoping we'd have Taggart here, because I remember in their correspondence, there was a line about they had some input or alternative methods that they had that could bring down the cost of infrastructure. Are those alternative methods factored into the cost estimates that you've presented to us, or are they still things that will be explored through the EA, or how are you approaching that?
Mr. Chair, we're interested in learning more from Taggart on that. We haven't seen anything in writing. I know that they have mentioned an interest in pursuing other options to allow them to phase in infrastructure at lower cost initially before making these major investments. So we will continue to have the conversations that we've been having throughout this process with Taywin and make sure that we come up with a final solution that is affordable and appropriate.
Okay, thank you. I'll just note, we had some correspondence late yesterday from the Carp Road Corridor Business Association, and they had some suggestions for changes to some of the policy language to better reflect servicing needs in rural employment areas. We were out of runway to deal with it today, but it is something that I know staff is willing to meet on between now and council and explore if there's anything that's appropriate now or in the future. So thank you for that. The third thing I wanted to ask about was the letter we have from GOBA says that they have some disagreement around cost estimates for some of the IMP projects. Can you give us some more context around that? Is there a huge discrepancy? Is it, could it be, well, looking for kind of order of magnitude over where there might be disagreement, and also how you're approaching resolving those disagreements on costing?
Mr. Chair, we did have a series of meetings late last fall with GOBA to speak directly together on the costing and discuss the disagreements about how the costing was put together. The main focus was on contingency factors that were applied to the projects, as well as risk factors, additional risk factors where we know of specific conditions that could increase the cost of those projects. And so there was concern that there may be some double counting in terms of adding contingency on contingency. So through those discussions, I think we came to, we did make some adjustments, and that resulted in about a 9% reduction in capital cost estimates at the time. Of course, we didn't agree on everything, but I think we certainly put in quite a bit of effort to address the concerns that GOBA raised through that process.
Are there still outstanding concerns, though?
None that have come to me that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, okay. I may come back on, Chair, but I'll leave it there for now. Thanks.
Yep, thank you very much, Vice Chair. And I'll just note we are adhering to the 5-minute rule, but there's unlimited opportunities to come back on the speaking list. Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair. I know that at some point, I think I may want to, I don't believe we got a copy of that, the Taywin motion. At some point, I think I may want to hear either from the mover of the motion or from staff of what that motion, what the implications of passing that motion might be. But my questions are more to, so as with my colleague, Councillor Johnson, I'm very, very excited about several of the elements of the IMP, particularly how they apply to our frequently soaked areas of the city. On the issue of the under the stormwater management strategy, and specifically the on-site stormwater management program, which I am very enthused to see, as I understand that program applies specifically and exclusively to pending development, and I very much appreciate it. I suppose what I want to ask is whether or not the implementation and, let's say, new standards accomplished through that new development, will that provide staff with any tools with which to go back and enforce or seek retrofits on existing examples of bad drainage on some of these intensified areas?
Thank you, Chair. The short answer is no.
when a property is, a building is bought, the building is torn down, this is a key opportunity to do what you were just mentioning, address rear yard drainage one property at a time, address major overland flow from the property to the road or to adjacent properties. We have to use our existing tools, unfortunately, for issues of existing issues. And I think you're very aware that existing issues between two private owners are some of the most challenging ones to resolve for the city.
I do, and I've had many experiences of that. However, with the, let's say, 5 years down the road with the implementation of this new on-site stormwater management strategy, we may have new properties developed to certain elevated standards, and the neighbor, the grandfather, no pun intended, might not have the same standards. I know that recently along Baseline Road in my neighborhood, some recent developments did not adhere to what should be proper drainage standards, and there's been a very successful implementation of enforcement through the site alteration bylaw at 4 specific units on Baseline. And what I may hope might come of this new policy, which I support, is that in the next several years, when owners see, all right, I don't have what this new house has, that we may get stronger enforcement of the site alteration bylaw, because I've had challenges with getting that bylaw enforced in the past. And then my last question, so to Susan, Susan, I wouldn't mind just hearing what you and I just discussed about with regards to, in the IMP, under the wastewater management projects, there is the project for Merivale South Extension, and that obviously this is a wastewater project and not a stormwater project. But could you just reiterate what you were saying to me about when we do have the Merivale secondary plan process coming up in the hopefully not too distant future, that there may be opportunities to tag on projects such as what we heard earlier from the delegate about stormwater tree trenches?
Thank you, Chair. All of the projects that are identified in the infrastructure master plan lines on a map right now, and as they make their way to reality, the coordination of any single project to have synergy and opportunities as a result of other needs is real and is a very active monthly review that we do in infrastructure and water services to make sure it's part of our due diligence to make sure we're getting best bang for our buck. So if the secondary plan were to identify other projects, not necessarily underground projects, we certainly would aim to get that synergy of any other kind of improvements that could be an outcome. So.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank Vice Chair Gower for raising the correspondence that we both received from the Carp Road corridor yesterday, and look forward to follow-up conversations on that. But for now, my first question would be about the stormwater management strategy. And as some of you may have heard, the idea of stormwater and how we charge for that and how we deal with that has become a very hot topic in the rural wards. Just had a fresh off a very contentious public meeting about that. And so I just wanted to understand how the stormwater strategy and what we're currently talking about now with the rate review and what might come out of that, because that report's not actually coming till 2025. The public consultations are just getting underway, and they started in the rural area and they're not even completed that yet. So I anticipate, and certainly as a rural councillor, I hope that the current proposal will be shifted or changed in some way that will be more beneficial to rural residents. So with that in mind, is it premature to pass this part of the infrastructure master plan before the conclusion of that debate? And then if there are changes to the approach that come out of that, how are they addressed in 2025 after passing this? So I just wanted to make sure we understand that both of those conversations are happening at the same time and what the ramifications of changes to the strategy may be come 2025.
Mr. Chair, there are a lot of concurrent activities at the city that relate to overlapping things, and certainly the goal today is the approval of the infrastructure master plan as a guiding document companion to the official plan. And as additional items are considered by council, staff will always follow direction in terms of making sure that things are harmonious.
Okay, thank you. One more follow-up on that, because I heard some talk about ditches, and so I'll continue down that because it's a hot topic again in my ward. So does the city, the staff that are here today, do you consider the roadside ditches in rural areas to be part of a stormwater management network?
Thank you, Chair. Holistically, yes, stormwater, the way we use the term, it incorporates various different forms of treatment or attenuation of stormwater, but also the conveyance of stormwater. And roadside ditches certainly convey stormwater, as you know, in rural areas as well as urban areas.
Just currently, in your opinion, who is responsible for the maintenance of those ditches, particularly when a blockage occurs or perhaps regrading needs to happen in the ditch to ensure flow?
Thank you, Chair. Generally, the answer is Public Works. If there are questions on a case-by-case basis, of course, please reach out to us and we could help.
Okay. So how often are Public Works and Infrastructure and Water Services in contact with each other about making sure rural ditches are functional?
Thank you, Chair. There's two ways to answer that. One is through a normal maintenance program, we need to be aligned, but not necessarily coordinated. Public Works knows their scope of work. The other part of the answer is that Public Works and Asset Management Infrastructure Services are part of a common working group to deal with understanding surveillance, maintenance of ditches. So there's a broader internal working group to try and improve the way we do things.
Thank you. Just shifting gears a little now to Carp Village water study, and I know that's not directly related to what we're talking about today, but we were talking about how infrastructure gets paid for, and how sometimes it's paid for by the developers or through DCs, but there is currently a study going on for the village of Carp, which is on a communal well system, and they will either recommend continuing with a communal well system or the idea of hooking up to city water. So if the conclusion hypothetically would be that Carp Village is ready to be hooked up to city water from Britannia, who would be paying, or how would that 8, 10, 12 kilometers of pipe from either the Huntmar area or Maxwell Bridge get paid for? Would that be paid for through the current water rate that residents of the village are paying, or how would that be covered?
Mr. Chair, the project would be funded based on who benefits. So if there's new development that would benefit from the project, there would be a commensurate contribution. And there would likely be a benefit to existing component if we're replacing a communal well system with a water main. That project would be benefiting existing residents and would be partly covered by rate.
So you would anticipate the rate going up?
I beg your pardon?
So you would anticipate the water rate that the current members or residents of the village pay would increase to pay for some of the new infrastructure?
The water rate is distributed amongst all residents who are connected to the central system. So there wouldn't be a special charge to the residents of the village of Carp.
But would the rate need to increase?
So the rates are developed every year as part of the budgeting process, and we look at what we think our volumetric is going to be going forward, divide that by the costs to deliver the service overall, and we come up with a budget for that year, and that's how the rates are established. They're not a area by area charge.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kelly. I'm starting to get a couple inquiries. We are going to take a 15-minute break somewhere around noon or so. Councillor Kavanaugh.
There, I didn't push the wrong button this time. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for all the work that's gone into this. This is the absolute bones of what we do as a city. We just can't run a city without infrastructure, and it's the big part of the official plan. So I appreciate the work. Can staff remind us why it was not supported to have via from the point of view of infrastructure to add Taywin to our urban boundary in terms of what they foresaw with the cost for infrastructure?
So, Mr. Chair, through the official plan review, staff did not review Taywin. The expansion lands were put into, Canada lands were put into two different categories. Category 1's lands mostly met the criteria that staff had established to add to the urban area. Category 2 lands did not score as well, and lands such as Taywin and other areas in the rural area were not assessed through the official plan. So in terms of the question, Mr. Chair, the Taywin lands were not assessed by staff.
And why weren't they assessed? Because it just didn't even meet stage 1 and 2?
That's correct.
Okay. One of the concerns, now it's part of it, and I don't know how we're going to go forward, but it's a huge cost. But I'm concerned about the Greenbelt. Have we got permission from the NCC to, in terms of cooperation? Because it sounds like there's going to be a lot of digging up to go through to get to Taywin.
Thank you, Chair. The NCC is certainly well aware of our plans. We've been consulting with them through the development of the infrastructure master plan, and we've received feedback from them. The alignments that have been proposed at a conceptual level generally follow existing rights of way. So the impacts on the Greenbelt should be limited. There may be a need for a construction easement, and we certainly won't have NCC approval until we have a final detailed design for the project. But they certainly have been engaged and are aware of what we're doing.
Could they have a veto on this? If they decided no?
We would need a permit, like any other infrastructure project that goes through the Greenbelt. I think it's similar to other transportation and infrastructure projects. They're interested in consolidating infrastructure corridors and minimizing impacts through the Greenbelt, but they understand the city's need to build and extend infrastructure to meet the city's needs.
One of the concerns is maintenance costs. It's the price tag for building this system is huge, and I'm concerned about what is already existing infrastructure that we have. We just had a massive project go through in my ward, Queensway Terrace North, replacement of massive pipes that were aged out. Will this put a strain on all these projects? Because that's my big concern, is that we have aging infrastructure, and of course we're having intensification, and then we're adding all this new infrastructure that is over and above. What can you tell us about working on making sure that we keep that, which is a growing price tag, on the existing infrastructure and keeping it up to date with rising costs?
Thank you, Chair. The operations and maintenance costs, that's associated with all of our infrastructure. It's on a per linear basis. So we have those costs are things that we have to deal with for all existing and proposed infrastructure in the infrastructure master plan. So it's an incremental cost. There are some startup challenges with operations and maintenance for the Taywin South Urban Community infrastructure, and we've considered those in the development of the solutions. So the projects involve large diameter pipes that will be needed to service in the initial stages of development very low demands. And so the concepts that we've developed, they ensure that the operations and maintenance costs are not out of line with the cost for other infrastructure in the system. But otherwise, it's an incremental cost similar to costs elsewhere in the system.
Mr. Chair, if
Thank you.
could I please
Hello?
If I could please add to that, I'd just like to remind Council of our asset management plans that take a holistic 10-year view of our renewal needs as well as our growth needs. The affordability, I think, is what we're talking about here, is how will we afford both, and will one put pressure on the other? And certainly those overall assessments of affordability are part of development charges background as well as part of our upcoming long-range financial plan.
I was wondering, is it possible that Tailwind could just have ditches like some of my neighborhoods?
Thank you, Chair. Without knowing Taywin's detailed plans conceptually, I don't see any reason why you can't use ditches as opposed to sewers inside the Taywin property. I don't know the details, unfortunately, about the Taywin proposal, so I couldn't comment any further.
Okay, I know they have Lita clay, which is problematic, and that's something we also have in some of our neighborhoods. I appreciate the talk about ditches. That's something that who knew that would be so popular topic, and I appreciate that that's being looked at very seriously. It's something I've been advocating for years about. So I thank staff for all the work on all the rain-ready projects, because that helps as well in terms of stormwater management. And I remain concerned about massive infrastructure that's not in the urban core, and appreciate the motion that's been brought forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kavanagh. Let's take 15 minutes as a bio break, but first, the Ottawa Public Library Board Chair, did I get that right, Matt, has asked for 1 minute just to respond to some comments that were made, so I'll provide that to him.
Won't even need that, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the opportunity before the break. I don't want to hold you any longer. Earlier in the meeting, a delegate made comments referring to the operating hours of the Ottawa Public Library, and we really appreciate the delegation's passion for library services. I would like to clarify that we are now under summer hours and that Sundays are available at 10 branches throughout the system, plus our call-in service throughout the rest of the year. As trustees, former trustees, and those familiar with our services will know, there are considerations that are beyond budget that contribute to decisions on hours of operation. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Chair. You've reminded me I've got a book to pick up. My holds are in. Let's take 15 minutes. We'll be back at 12:15. Thank you. All right, let's resume questions to staff with Councillor Kelly. Councillor Curry.
If it's not Kelly, it's Carr. People get us all confused, eh? We all look alike. All right. So thank you very much, first of all, to staff, and thanks for the briefings that we've had. They're super helpful. Some of my questions here, I'm just going to repeat from the briefing so that other people can get the answers. I did want to say that, you know, the forethought here, while this is on much larger scale, reminds me of the 100 Constellation Drive motion, where staff were so smart many, many years ago and really helped us now. So, you know, councils of the future will look back on this and think, wow, that was very, very smart to go ahead and do this now. So anyway, I just wanted to say thank you very much for that. Always looking way out. Second thing I wanted to ask is very Canada-centric, but the Penfield Trunk Sewer upgrade says this is for the wastewater master plan list. 95% of it growth funded. How is that the case when Penfield is such an older part of Canada?
That would be the case because the sewer upgrade would be required to meet growth requirements only. The infrastructure there is, as I understand, is in fine condition and would not otherwise need to be upgraded at this time.
Okay. Thank you for that. In the list here that I'm looking at, I don't know if you have it right in front of you, which one of them is the work that's being done on March Valley Road?
I'm sorry, I don't have the answer to that question at this time.
So there's March PS, capacity upgrade, Canada West PS, Canada West sewer, Canada West diversion. Is one of them that section of March Valley where there's significant work being done?
If we can hold that question, we'll get back to you. Thank you.
That's fine. My question again on that was going to be, if it's one of them, if it's one that says 100%, fair enough. If it is a 70%, I guess I wanted to wonder why it wasn't 100%, because I understand it's all growth. The next question I have was in terms of all of these plans, wastewater maybe predominantly, how much of our district energy goals and plans were taken into consideration with some of these plans and in conjunction with Hydro Ottawa's district energy plan?
Thank you, Chair. There's different forms of district energy. If you're referring specifically to what we now call the SEES project, the Sewer Energy Recovery Project, we did some analysis with our friends in the climate change team when these concepts were coming off the ground, and they did some work to understand what technologies would work in which conditions. And the technology that rose to the top, I forgot the name of it exactly, but it requires a certain continuous flow of sewage to be able to recover or dispose of heat. And so what we found through our analysis, and we mapped the sewers in the city that met the minimum criteria. These tend to be in older areas of the city and larger trunks, because these are the areas that already have homes connected to them, and they're large enough that they collect enough homes that they have a constant enough flow. It's not just how constant the flow is, but it needs to be over a certain number, and I forgot the exact number, but they tended to be the larger sewers. So, go ahead.
So none of these then?
So newer sewers that don't have a lot of flow typically wouldn't be the ideal candidate for this type of technology. Over time, they may become that candidate, but you have to have that certain amount of flow. Trunk sewers are the ones that tend to have larger flows, but on a case-by-case basis, not even all trunk sewers have enough flow for all technologies. There are different technologies, however.
Okay, but as we evolve and as technology evolves, you're not ruling anything out, you're not preventing anything at this stage that couldn't happen in future?
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely not. We're not ruling out anything. These technologies are new, and as new come online, we will be able to support the teams to understand which sewers may be more feasible than others.
Okay, great. I'm glad to hear that. Question I asked in one of the briefings was, so one of my briefings, I think, was right after Calgary had their big problem. So in terms of what has happened in Calgary, and you look at this plan in front of us, is this plan, you think, are you confident to tell us that we would never experience anything like that here?
It's a very timely question, Mr. Chair, and we're happy to provide an answer. Today, what you have before you is an infrastructure master plan that's been evolving over decades. And I'm very proud of our forefathers and foremothers who actually put a plan in place that looked at failure scenarios so that and also build in redundancy, meaning that if there are single line feeds, we need to take a look at doubling some of those feeds across the city. And in designing those feeds, they made sure that on a single point of failure, we would still be able to meet basic day demands, which means that you can still use the water in your homes. You may not be able to use your outdoor and outdoor water use, which contributes to peak demands, but you should be able to get by with your day-to-day needs within your home. So these infrastructure master plans are important, and they provide that stability and that resiliency that we're looking for. We also have the fortunate to have two drinking water plants that were also built in different decades using different materials. And so there is a lot of robustness. Of course, we can't guarantee that there won't be an infrastructure failure in place, but we have a lot of contingency measures as well, maintenance, condition assessments that also support that infrastructure.
Great, I'm glad you're able to give us that answer. Just going back to the March Valley one, I'm not sure if anyone has an answer to that, and then otherwise I have one more question.
Sorry, Chair, we're still waiting for staff to come up with an answer to that question. It is, I think, about $3 million project out of 37 projects. So what the rationale is for the cost splits, I will hopefully have that before the end of committee.
Thank you for that. My last question is just simply on the discussion around Taywin here. Just so we are all clear in terms of last term of council decisions, this term of council decisions, when we go down the road of looking at something that was already determined, can somebody, maybe there's a legal comment about whether do we need to reconsider? Is there any conflict that, it's in our official plan? If we were to do something down the road that we'd have to, take some legal challenges, potentially lawsuits. Is there any legal comment right now in terms of the risks of even looking at this again?
Mr. Chair, council is entitled to look at its official plan at any time. There's certain times where you have to do it, but council is always entitled to look at it. And there will certainly be impacts, not necessarily legal impacts, there will be impacts if council were to decide to change the official plan, to remove one or more areas. And if a motion comes forward and it is carried, staff will provide that information in a report that comes back to council.
Okay. And I will find the answer to the other question on my own, for my own community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Curry. I'm sorry. Oh my. Callie Carr. Lost total control. Councillor Lowe, you're next. Move us in a good direction here.
Oh, that is that's a heavy ask. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. My understanding of this is that this is more, if we were to categorize it with something else, this is more like a long-range financial plan than an actual financial commitment. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Whereas there's no budget approval as part of this report, it's a plan that we have to go away, develop an affordability model that does feed into the asset management plans and the DC background study.
Thank you. And with all the discussion that's around Taywin, like what are the possible outcomes if the development doesn't go ahead? Like is the timeline for water main and sewer construction, does that precede the development, or does that sort of come with it as it gets approved?
Mr. Chair, the off-site water and wastewater infrastructure is required day one before any home can be serviced in the Taywin community.
Correct. So, I understand there's a portion of the big water main that does this going down into Taywin. I understand there's a portion of that that's meant to also increase capacity in some of the existing communities along Heron Road and wherever else it passes. So I guess what would happen if what would happen? Like, would we have pipes that are just way over capacity? Would those projects even go ahead, the capacity improvements on Heron Road and everywhere else that's sort of west of the Greenbelt, before the Greenbelt? Would those still go ahead if let's say, Taywin ultimately does not go ahead?
Mr. Chair, no, those projects would not go ahead. Those projects are only needed to meet the needs for Taywin and the South Urban community. And to be clear, they're not, there is a benefit in terms of improving pressures to the residents in that area, but it's not a project that we would do unless Taywin and the South Urban community needed that water.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. Okay, so we'll move past that then. One of the public delegations had mentioned the use of more natural methods to sort of improve our stormwater management. And while it doesn't, directly relate to items that are being spoken to in the infrastructure master plan, are those other methods ever considered when it comes to determining what this funding is like? So let's say in Taywin, there's considerations for doing soil cells, tree trenches, bioswales, whatever, along most or all of the road network in that future community. Would that ever be considered as possible relief for what capacity we might need for stormwater management in that new community?
It's possible that infrastructure could constitute a credit towards water quality requirements, and may also mitigate the need for upgrades to the downstream water course in South Bear Brook. There are limitations on what low impact development can achieve, what it can achieve in this area, as in many other parts of the city, because of the clay soil conditions. It's not conducive to infiltration, for example, and that is often a key benefit of low impact development type of measures.
Cool, thanks very much. I said I'd move off Taywin, and I think I asked a question about Taywin again. But with regards to Councillor Menard's motion or direction, I'm not sure, I note that right now it only speaks to the water feeder main. Would there be a necessity to include the sewage pipe that's also in the IMP for that community?
No.
Okay, thank you very much. Lastly, just fun, useless fact is Taywin was considered as the third, originally the third satellite city before Barrhaven expanded. So throw that out there for no reason. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lowe. Councillor Kitts.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you to staff. Very detailed, forward-thinking, complex work, and appreciate all the information you provided us beforehand. Notre-Dame-des-Champs is recognized as a service village in the OP, and the IMP highlights that it's a community that's likely to benefit from a local improvement plan to connect to infrastructure in the future. But there is a lot of historically rural homes that specifically on Navin Road and Renault Road that are now completely surrounded by suburban development. So I'm wondering, will those residents ever get an opportunity to connect to our infrastructure?
They would have an opportunity if they're in the village, which is in the public service area. But I'm sorry, I don't know if those sections of road that you're talking about are actually in the village.
Yeah, no, they're not in the village. They're adjacent, like they're within the urban boundary, adjacent to developing suburban communities. But they're kind of one-offs.
Yeah, we do have policies in the new infrastructure master plan that would require consideration of adjacent privately serviced areas where there is, urban expansion. If it's immediately adjacent, we want to consider that opportunity. But there are policies in the official plan that would need to be addressed in terms of criteria for getting into the public service area.
Okay, so it's kind of every situation's different a little bit?
That's right.
Okay. And I know residents of Carlsbad Springs are wondering the same thing for when if Taywin should proceed, will they have an opportunity, current residents of Rad Springs, would they have an opportunity to connect to the infrastructure?
Well, many of those residents would be inside the new Taywin community, and so they would be inside the new public service area, and so they would have an opportunity to connect to water and wastewater services. Otherwise, the residents on the trickle feed system, they're already in a water public service area, and so they would have the opportunity to connect to the new Taywin water system, which would provide a different level of service than they currently enjoy on the trickle feed system.
Okay, great, thank you. On groundwater, I note that Navin will not require a future study. Contamination is low risk, which is good news. My concern for water in Navin is actually not the quality, but the quantity and a diminishment of the aquifer. But that's not contemplated here. It would appear in the water environment master strategy. Am I correct?
Mr. Chair, the city does have a groundwater characterization program, and we look at villages across the city on a priority basis to investigate conditions in those villages and the security of the private water services that exist. And so we could have an opportunity to discuss the prioritization of Navin in that context.
Okay, we can take that offline, just trying to figure out where that'll appear. Okay. Are staff supportive of doing the work requested in Councillor Menard's motion?
We will follow the will of committee.
Okay, political answer. Okay, well, on that, if it were to go forward, we can anticipate if portions of the SUC were separated from Taywin's infrastructure, the cost of servicing for SUC would go up, correct? Because it's essentially piggybacking on Taywin?
Mr. Chair, the cost to the outside Greenbelt development charges account would go up because the project would be limited to the South Urban Community area, and Taywin would not be contributing to those costs.
Okay, was my understanding. I just wanted to make sure it's correct. One more thing that's more of a comment, but I think what's in front of us today describes the servicing challenges of the expansion areas in the official plan, obviously. But is it fair to say that what's not captured is significant servicing challenges associated with other expansion areas that we did not move forward on with the official plan, and that many of those expansion areas are low-lying, have soil or poor soil conditions, significant transportation challenges, and would also potentially have high servicing costs. Is that fair to say?
Mr. Chair, it would be case specific, and the internal servicing costs, that would be the responsibility fully of the developer, may be high. Not necessarily the offsite costs that would be reflected in the infrastructure master plan, depending on the proximity of services with enough capacity to accommodate those areas.
Okay, I think that's just an important footnote as the city continues to grow. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kitts. Chairman Hart.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's appreciated, and the staff work is really appreciated on this IMP. You've done a great job of it, obviously, following direction from council, and I think it's really transparent as well with the documents that have been appended and the plans associated with it. So thank you to you for all your work in getting us here. I know it's been a long time coming too. I think we had about a year delay, so it's nice to be here having this discussion now. I did want to just go through a couple of points on the Taywin piece, just to get clarity. In one of the documents, document 1 in the section 8 piece, it talks about the fact that this is a very unique expansion area because it's not contiguous to the existing urban area, and many kilometers of trunk infrastructure will be needed to service the development, is what it says. Just in the other expansion areas in the urban boundary, how does that work? Is it just that it's extended from the current infrastructure, or is there other, I guess, capacity that's built in other areas to then feed those contiguous areas where urban expansion is taking place?
Mr. Chair, every expansion area is different, and some are adjacent or close to a trunk infrastructure capacity that has sufficient capacity available to accommodate them, and others require upgrades. So we analyze the entire system and look at the cumulative impacts of all of the expansion areas to determine what is required. So we don't necessarily look at each individual expansion area in terms of what exactly each one needs, but it's the impact on the system, plus whatever extensions are required to get from the backbone of the system to that expansion area.
The post-period cost we've talked about, the total there is about $171 million, and 160, is it 8.9, something like that, is just for the Taywin post-period cost and the surrounding potential area there. In the document, in document 1, it talks about the expansion, if it would to take place, would likely be towards the west of those Taywin lands, potentially connecting to the Leitrim area where Bank Street hits there, and then in a build-out scenario. And there may also be future potential for limited expansion to the southeast of Taywin. So a lot of potential urban boundary expansion in the future. I guess the process for that would come to council in the future under a new official plan discussion and debate. When is the next one scheduled for council to occur?
So, Mr. Chair, for the official plan review, there was a motion by council when the official plan was adopted to come back at the Q4 2026 with a review of how we're doing for greenfield residential and industrial lands. So that review may determine a need for review or may not. Under the Planning Act, the next review would be scheduled 10 years since adoption of the official plan, so approximately 2031 otherwise.
Sorry, that review, can you remind me of the timing? I think that was a Councillor Moffat motion at the time from last term, but I'm trying to remember the timing of that.
We were to come back Q4 2026, so that may or may not trigger a review.
Okay, thank you for that. On the cost to service Taywin, we're going to be talking about really high DCs, I guess, for this area, right? So like in comparison to say an average area in the urban area, what's the difference that we're talking about here? Like how much more are we talking for DCs in this area? I guess we're not fully in yet. Like we have to wait for road costs to come, transit costs to come, all the other major DC category areas. So just, can you give me a ballpark though of like how much more on the DC side Taywin would cost versus say an urban area? Guess we're not there yet, but.
Mr. Chair, the IMP team is not really prepared to answer that question. I'm sure that there is more work to be done to determine how the IMP cost will translate into a development charge when that information is ready.
Yeah, and that's fair and what I figured. I guess the question I guess then is, so when will council get the road expansion costs for that Taywin piece, and when would we get the transit capital costs for that piece as well?
Mr. Chair, the timing for that would be approximately concurrent with the Transportation Master Plan.
Okay, that's really helpful. Taggart wasn't here today to answer questions. Do we know why they didn't attend, or we don't have that information, I guess? Okay. And this someone had mentioned this to me at some point. I don't know. I don't think it's accurate, but I just want to ask the question. Does Taggart have a pay for like embedded city staff or pay for staff internally in the department? Like is some of that funding going towards staff just working on this project or not?
Mr. Chair, there is a memorandum of understanding between the Taywin proponents and the city to pay for staff resources dedicated to the Taywin secondary plan. It is a senior project manager for infrastructure, senior project manager for transportation, and a planner for the planning component.
Okay, that's a lot. I didn't realize the extent of it, but I guess just on that point, we're adding in the report 2 FTEs potentially as part of the recommendations. Is that at all related, or that's completely separate just to the infrastructure costs? I assume it's separate based on the IMP here.
That's correct, Mr. Chair. It's separate.
Okay, all right. Thanks for that. With regard to the operations and maintenance costs of this area, because this is just one small piece, the 600 million is one piece. You got transit to come, roads to come, and then of course the operations to maintain those pieces. The maintenance of this infrastructure alone, like just the water side, I assume that's less than like roads and our transit maintenance, but can you just speak to the operational maintenance of this type of infrastructure?
We have lots of information on how much it costs to operate and maintain our existing infrastructure. We could definitely determine what a per meter cost would be. And I want to reference the comments that Isabel Jasmine made previously about how the rate is set every year to take into account what the needs are for the coming year and who are the ratepayers that would share that cost.
Okay, thanks for that. And Chair, just on the motion piece, I know we had talked about it. You mentioned that it's probably a small piece of work. It is feasible, it's operational, it's in order. This is something you could support in that way from a staff side.
Mr. Chair, an addition of an additional option or couple of options to an environmental assessment study that's going to proceed anyway is an effective way of completing that analysis and bringing it forward for Council's review.
Okay, thank you for that. Thanks, Chair.
Sean, you're at time if you want to come. Okay. Thank you very much, Chair Menard. Councillor Luloff.
Thanks, Chairs. Can staff highlight for me how this IMP will be able to address the growth expected by the realization of the Orleans Economic Corridor secondary plan? We'll see moderate to significant densification in transit-oriented development areas that are now partially on a ditch system for stormwater management.
Yep, through the secondary plan process, we would identify opportunities to and needs to improve the infrastructure, and and a servicing study would need to sort of complement that work and identify the projects and how that work would be financed.
So is that going to come into play after the comprehensive zoning review, I suppose, when we can see kind of like right now we've got permissibility through the study, but you know, when it comes to, is this going to come after the comprehensive zoning review, or is this something that's going to be project by project?
So, Mr. Chair, in terms of the timing with the Orleans Corridor secondary plan, it is currently under appeal until those appeals have been adjudicated. The new zoning bylaw could implement the secondary plan. In the interim, proponents could also come forward with applications that are consistent with the secondary plan.
Okay, wonderful. ROP process was a bit of a wild ride, given 2 rounds of provincial direction. You know, we saw land come in, land come out. Would it make sense to do the analysis asked for in the motion on all land that's come into our urban boundary, and perhaps some analysis on adding lands that were taken out in the second round that might need to come in at update time rather than single out a specific expansion area?
We leave it to committee to decide what would make sense in the city's best interest.
Would the mover of the motion be interested in a friendly amendment to ensure that that we have that information available to us?
So Councillor, I need to see the wording of what you're referencing, and the potential staff time associated with it. I'm always open though. I just need to see the wording, so.
Yeah, sure. I can flip that over to you into the committee clerk just to see if that's something that that might be a good idea to do. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lilloff. Councillor Hill?
There we go. I think I got the technology sorted out here. Thank you very much for the presentation. Just a couple technical questions that I think are specific here for Barrhaven. On page 16 of the report, you note that the South Urban Community, which includes Barrhaven, will begin to strain its drinking water capacity before 2046. What is our precise projection for when Barrhaven will need increased water transmission capacity?
Mr. Chair, we have to consider the entire drinking water service area of the South Urban Community, including Barrhaven, Riverside South, and Leitrim. It's all part of one subsystem of the city's distribution network. And based on the work that we've done for the to develop the water master plan, the additional conveyance capacity or transmission capacity through the green belt would be needed when we see an additional roughly 30,000 dwelling units built in that whole area. And so that would include Taywin as well under the current plan. So it would be later on, it's later on in the planning period.
Okay, thank you. And on page 17, you describe how the Taywin South Urban Community Water Sewage System will be built above and beyond their current projected needs to oversize for future growth. Did we take that same oversizing approach to the current South Urban Community water infrastructure? And if so, is this current upgrade within our original timeline?
I can't speak to the previous master plans that may have taken a somewhat different approach, and we consider through the master planning process what the available capacity is, existing available capacity, and leverage that as much as possible before identifying any new projects. And timelines are always shifting based on the rates of development and monitoring demands in the system.
And I know that we have some discussions happening right now with the current motion that Councillor Menard put forward, but just a few questions for me to clarify the Taywin component to this. Taywin, as it stands as part of the official plan right now, makes up a fairly substantial number of the housing units that we're taking into consideration for when we look at our overall housing requirements and long-term housing supply, yes?
Yes.
So if the implication of reviewing the current official plan that includes Taywin is to look at options that could include not keeping Taywin within that component to the urban boundary, we would need to be finding capacity for those housing units elsewhere.
Mr. Chair, that's correct. If Taywin is taken out through an official plan amendment, staff would likely recommend process to add the equivalent back into the official plan.
Is it fair to say that even with today's official plan and the long-term housing supply that we have today, with Taywin included, that there is a disconnect between the ministry's housing assessment that Ottawa is going to need and our current official plan housing supply?
So, Mr. Chair, that connection is not very concrete because the Ministry of Finance projections are only population, not housing. So, similar to what staff did in the previous official plan review, when we did consider very close to Ministry of Finance population projections at the time, we'd have to translate that into housing for the Ottawa context. So staff would have to undergo some additional work to reevaluate the growth projections and make a recommendation on where we go from that analysis.
How robust have city staff looked at the trends towards housing prices going forward with the projections on interest rate reductions and on capacity within the construction industry, and what that could mean in terms of house prices as demand increases with interest rate reductions over the next 5 years?
So, Mr. Chair, in terms of the land budget, the components really go to the need for housing in terms of units, rather than a more finer-tuned assessment of housing prices. Historically, the unit types are indicative of the housing prices for the market.
It's probably an unfair question, and feel free to tell me that if it is, but is it not reasonable that should we not have adequate land supply to be able to aggressively build market rate housing over the next 5 to 10 years, that we could see a drastic increase in house prices in Ottawa?
Mr. Chair, that's one possibility. However, I would note that there are many factors that go into housing prices and the market. Supply is one component. And I'd also remind committee or joint committee that there are also tens of thousands of units that are either registered, draft approved, or in applications, and within approved secondary plans that would be further in the pipeline before any expansion lands come online.
Before certainly Taywin comes online, but there are other expansion lands that are more proximate to infrastructure systems.
Yes, Mr. Chair, that's true, but the point that staff is trying to make in terms of supply is that there is an extensive pipeline of units that can come in line to address that, and they're ready to go in line with the capabilities of the construction industry.
But it would be fair to say that to reduce Taywin as an option, that would reduce that overall housing supply that we would have.
Mr. Chair, that's true in the longer term, that reduction would reduce the overall longer term reduction of that supply.
Thank you. I just want to follow up on one question that my colleague, Councillor Curry, made with regard to the implications to potentially looking at the option of considering not including Taywin in this study. I can understand that perhaps you could do the numbers and look at it from an infrastructure perspective, but the implication of that is not including Taywin in our urban boundary for residential development. And I guess my question, to be specific, would be, do we have a order of magnitude liability cost that would potentially go with undoing that parcel as part of the urban boundary?
So, Mr. Chair, I just want to clarify in terms of liability cost, is that in terms of dollars?
That's in terms of dollars.
So I'd ask legal services to comment on that.
Mr. Chair, it is a general principle of planning law that there is no compensation that is due for an upzoning or for a downzoning. And so there's a process that one has to go through, and it would be subject to appeal. But if the appeal were successful, there's no, in my opinion, there's no entitlement compensation for the removal of an urban designation.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hill. Councillor Troster?
Thank you so much, Chair. First of all, I appreciate your questions, Councillor Hill. I really do. I think for some of us who were recently elected, I don't know if we're considered new anymore after almost 2 years, but you know, taking a look at this infrastructure master plan, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars to service this new community, and I think we all want growth, but we want it to do it responsibly. And I have to say, as an urban dweller and representing an urban ward, this really demonstrates the incredible cost of sprawl when we already have so many problems we're attempting to solve as a city, including homelessness and including lack of housing. Something that my residents are asking me is, how does this infrastructure master plan benefit existing urban neighborhoods that are in the midst of really heavy intensification. We're seeing, the green space we have left, we're seeing converted largely into hard surfaces. So I'm wondering if you could speak to the elements of this plan that address urban infrastructure needs. Thank you.
The policy that's established through the infrastructure master plan is that intensification growth from a servicing perspective should not have a negative impact on existing residents. In terms of potential benefits through intensification-driven upgrades to infrastructure, there's the opportunity to upgrade and provide new sewers and water mains and storm drainage systems as part of that redevelopment.
Well, we certainly benefit from the road restructuring and the additional transportation and active transportation infrastructure that happens when we pull up those pipes, including the sewer pipe from my own street that was pulled up and had 1905 etched on it. So we desperately need that renewal downtown. Is it also fair to say that the new requirement for on-site stormwater management will have a positive impact on flood mitigation in the urban areas?
Yes. Yes, the main intent of that program is to ensure that runoff from those sites does not increase.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I appreciate it. I really appreciated the briefing that we received in advance on that specific element. Thank you very much, and congratulations for your hard work.
Thank you, Councillor Trosser. Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the questions from my colleagues and from Councillor Curry for reminding us about Calgary. Just reminds us how important this stuff is. Everybody who took a shower this morning is reminded how valuable this whole thing is. I'm just going to go back to, I asked earlier about Taywin, and I don't think I quite phrased it the right way, but I wanted to know if there was an assessment on Taywin, and if you could give me information on if it was done and at the context at the time.
So, Mr. Chair, through the official plan review, staff had identified a need of 1,281 hectares of urban expansion lands, and staff had undergone an analysis of Category 1 and Category 2 lands. Category 1 lands that scored well to the criteria that Council had adopted in an amount of about 1,011 hectares. There was then therefore remaining 270 hectares that have yet to be identified, and staff had recommended to come back to Council with analysis of some options of how that 270 hectares could be added to the urban area. It could include some of the Category 2 lands. It could include looking at a more dispersed option to new areas or a concentrated option. And staff at the time had also provided a preliminary assessment of three areas, larger areas that were much larger than 270 hectares in order to scope where further analysis would be done. And so there was an assessment done generally in the lands that are currently Taywin today, but also surrounding that area. So there was an assessment done just to look at what would be some of the servicing constraints, distance from transit and other criteria, but staff had also recommended at the time that further information, further analysis is required in order to fully evaluate whether the lands, and these would be for all those potential candidate areas, would constitute good land use planning as potential urban expansion areas. So there was a preliminary assessment done, including the lands around Taywin. However, the lands were not scored to the same rigor as the Category 1 and Category 2 lands.
So we never got that, the thoroughness of the Category 1, Category 2.
That is correct. At the time, there was a document provided to Joint Committee and Council that identified the scoring, the initial assessment of those three areas, but the more detailed scoring was never conducted.
Okay, thank you.
At the time had provided recommendation.
I think that's really important to remember. And in terms of the official plan, we heard questions about the need for housing and the assessment of where housing could go. Taylor was not part of that discussion when we said how many houses we need and where they could possibly go.
Not the future neighborhood identified in official plan today as Taywin specifically, but again, just a high-level assessment done in the Taywin area.
Yes, but in the original official plan, when you're doing your calculations about where housing should go, and we've had a good discussion about the need for housing and the comparative costs for those in the urban areas. We're quite aware that there's still plenty of room for housing here and that it can be made up. But I just wanted to get your, confirmation that Taylor was not originally part of that.
Mr. Chair, that's correct.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that and all your work.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair. I want to go back a little bit to what I heard from a line of questioning that Councillor Menard had earlier, and it certainly got my ears perked. As I understood from Councillor Menard's line of questioning, I believe I heard that Taggart is currently funding staff positions that are tied to the Taywin project, and forgive me if I get some of the details wrong, because I heard this quickly. Can someone from staff clarify that current arrangement and whether these Taggart-funded positions are tied to one specific project, i.e. Taywin?
Mr. Chair, that is correct. The 3 FTEs noted earlier are tied to the Taywin project.
So 3 FTEs, is that for 1 year, or is that over a certain length of term?
Mr. Chair, some of the FTEs have different lengths, but generally 5 years is the term.
5 years, 3 FTEs. All right. Is this a normal practice? And do we have other current instances of developer-funded staff positions tied to projects that are associated with those developments?
Mr. Chair, there's none to my knowledge.
Thank you. Can I ask, so 3 FTEs, variously funded over 5 years. I heard that there's an MOU. As per that MOU, can these staff be assigned to other files or other projects outside of Taywin at management's discretion?
Generally,
Chair, it's Vivi Chi here, if I can respond. It's Vivi Chi here, if I can respond to your question, Councillor Devine. The 3 FTEs cannot work on any other project other than the Taywin file. It's because staff are quite busy, so we would need these positions to help on the file, and they are considered staff, not part of Taywin team, the developers team.
I'm not sure if I heard that last part. I heard that staff is quite busy and that these would be not part of. Can anybody tell me what the last sentence we just heard from there?
Would you like me to repeat?
Could you, clearly and slowly, please?
Okay. The 3 FTEs are city staff representatives to work on the Taywin file only, no other file. And so their priority is on the Taywin file. They may work on other things, but that's not the cost that Taywin is covering. So it's just staffing, additional resources that we have to help with this file.
Okay. In my head, I have growth pays for growth jokes that I'm trying to understand here. So if there's an MOU for this, so if I understand correctly, staff just said that this is, even before I asked the question about whether or not these staff can be assigned to other projects, when I just asked, is this normal practice? Staff answered no to that. I would imagine that having staff funded by an outside party tied to a project that is serving their interests, I would imagine that staff not having discretion to move those staff elsewhere at management's discretion, I would imagine that that would compound this being an unusual situation. If there's an MOU tied to this, it's certainly news to me. Is that MOU available, and can councillors view that MOU?
Mr. Chair, that MOU is publicly available.
It is publicly available. Would staff require a direction to issue that to councillors, or can I just send an email saying, hey, can I see the MOU? All right,
Yes, that's
it is?
sufficient.
It's in the official plan? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Devine. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you,
Bear with me
Mr.
just a
Chair.
moment.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Take your moment.
Okay, so my understanding is that Councillor Luloff has now proposed wording for a friendly amendment to Councillor Menard's motion with respect to the Taywin lands. Councillor Luloff, did you want to move ahead now and provide that wording, or make that to see whether it's a friendly motion?
Yes, of course. Thanks, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. So that the wording would be amended to read that the environmental assessment in respect to all infrastructure that would service all OP expansion lands as an option, possibility that development does not proceed. I think that this would provide us with more information. Given the cost to build right now and the current market, I think that it would be good to have all of this information. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No, thank you. So staff understand what this motion is trying to do. I think I understand it. Do you have any comments on that?
Mr. Chair, yes, thank you for the question. I think this is an extremely large scope of work. And so at this point in time, we would need some time to really evaluate what this really means in terms of resources and timing. And so, but we are concerned that we're moving next into the implementation of the infrastructure master plan. So we have the capacity management plan that we have to get going on. And so I am concerned that this changes the work plan drastically for us.
I appreciate that. Councillor Menard, you've heard staff's comments. Do you consider this to be a friendly motion?
Well, just based on staff comments, I don't think it'd be friendly at this time. I'd like to hear more motivation, but at this time it would be friendly.
Councillor Luloff, you've heard the staff concerns and you've heard that this isn't a friendly motion. Did you want to proceed with this as an amending motion to the Menard amending motion?
I am certainly concerned about the staff time. It just seems to me that, it would be good to have this information. If we're looking for it on one piece of expansion land, it would make sense to look at it for all expansion lands rather than single one out. I suppose I'll leave it on the table, and if committee, if it's the will of committee, not to move forward with it, that's fine. I just wanted to find a way to not be singling out one expansion land. And if we're looking for this information for one expansion land, then I think that, it would make sense that we have it for the rest of them, given the current market. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And so just to confirm, for the time being, that's not a motion that is on the table until someone moves that then. Thank you very much for everyone working behind the scenes to get that out there and done. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So first of all, again, very excited about the infrastructure master plan and very excited about the on-site stormwater management. I just have a couple questions about that. So in our ward, College Ward is seeing, a gentle intensification in some areas that are seeing, maybe 3 units or 4 units or sometimes up to 8 units with front to back semis, that kind of thing. And a lot of these are done by smaller developers who don't have the resources for development consultants.
And so my concern is, although I do very much want to see the implementation of on-site stormwater management, I want these small developers to be successful. I want them to not incur, an undue burden and slow down housing because of it, right? So can you help me to understand what additional supports we are offering for these small builders to bring them up to speed?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. It's an excellent one. We've done a lot of work to develop tools and in consultation with these small developers, and that's why we're not in a position yet to bring forward a plan for implementation. There's more work to be done to develop those tools and the guides to make it as simple as possible for those smaller developers. And we'll continue to consult with those developers before we implement a plan.
Okay, that's super. And just so you know, I've also reached out to GOBA to say, some of these guys are not your members either, right? And so I've encouraged GOBA to consider their membership tiers and how they might imagine, creating more accessibility to their advocacy and services and educational tools too, because these small guys can end up, getting stuck in a loop when it comes to some of these new guidelines, and I don't want to see that happen. It frustrates residents when they see, properties being bought up or demolition, different places that hold it up that affect the neighborhood. So I'm really glad to hear that. Similarly, what kind of outreach are we doing to engineers? Because it will be the engineers that are contracted to execute on this on-site stormwater management. So how are we supporting those engineers to get up to speed on these new guidelines as well?
Mr. Chair, we have been consulting with the engineering community, involving the engineering community in developing the new program, and including ensuring that we have engineers who are involved in small development projects as you've described.
Okay, that's super. And just with respect to Taywin, so looking at, Annex 10 in the official plan, we've got a bit of an outline in terms of how the financial plan for Taywin should be executed. And then, of course, this infrastructure master plan speaks to the official plan and its implementation. So I just wanted to check in, on some of the expectations from the official plan's perspective on the infrastructure master plan, and whether or not you feel that this document has responded appropriately to that. So the first one would be, potential impact to existing taxpayers over the planning horizon. Would you suggest that the post-capacity review in recommendation 3 will speak further to what impacts there might be on existing taxpayers for Taywin? Or I just don't see that one necessarily being completed at this stage. Are there future moments that we'll be talking to that particular expectation in the official plan?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So the IMP is one component of the works required for Taywin. And then, as we've heard from finance staff, there'd also have to be a long-range financial plan and looking at other mechanisms to finance that. So that would all go towards, for example, an area-specific development charge, and then that process. So there's nothing. The IMP doesn't wrap up Annex 10 today completely. It would be ongoing work as we get more information, to identify the estimates for the costs and then how those costs would be financed.
Okay, so we'll have future updates on some of those potential impacts, and that I think would also include the external capital infrastructure funding requirements that are listed there and capital financing alternatives. That's also still to come.
So that would be part of the funding strategy in the long-range financial plans.
Okay, tremendous. All right, so I think that's all I'll say about Taywin for now, as I wait for some of these other motions to get sort of hammered out. So I'll turn it back, Chair, and I'll jump back on if I need to. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Vice Chair Gower.
Thanks, Chair. So I'm listening and I'm thinking a lot about this question around Taywin, and I supported Taywin at committee and council in last term. The majority of council did. Many of you around the table were as part of that. And I'm still not sure if that decision was good or bad. It's probably on a spectrum somewhere between, and I don't really know how we'll evaluate that. Maybe we'll have to wait a few decades to see if it was right or wrong. But it was going back to 2019, the Taywin decision was a series of compromises and trade-offs. It was not an easy decision. There was no black and white. It involved a lot of discussion in public. It involved a lot of discussion behind the scenes with all sorts of partners. It was related to another huge debate in the official plan process around intensification versus expansion, 60% intensification versus 40%. All these things were all related. And I'm really frustrated at the thought that we might be going back and relitigating, sounds like maybe not only Taywin, but every other piece of expansion land that we've decided on. This was a really tough decision. It took us 3 years to get to it. And then the province went back and forth, and there have been so many delays. It's held up our infrastructure master plan. It's held up our transportation master plan. It's held up updating our development charges. The motion from our colleague is looking for an EA to look at the possibility that the Taywin development does not proceed. I've seen nothing to suggest that it won't. It's passed through council, it's passed through the province. As far as I'm aware, there were no appeals to that decision by council or the province. There have been no court actions or injunctions. We have no motions in front of us, in front of council to take it out. If there is a possibility that Taywin won't proceed, we might as well stop all of these long-term planning exercises because we're just wasting our time and staff's time. So I appreciate the conversation today, but I'm not going to support the motion about Taywin not proceeding because I just think it's setting us back again. We need to keep moving forward on decisions that we've already been made, and I just think another delay in this process ultimately costs us time, money, and resources that we're really scarce on right now. So also, the report and the recommendations in front of us do say that staff is going to continue to review how much post-period capacity is actually needed and what are the actual funding sources for that. And that's going to be important information to get back so we can make the next series of decisions around our long-range financial plan for this infrastructure. So we have that opportunity to make informed decisions as we go without having to go through a EA process looking at potentially removing land that's already been approved for expansion. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Councillor Carr. Vice Chair Carr.
Hi, thanks very much. I just wanted to confirm a few things. So my understanding from the motion was not that it would be taken out, but that we were costing out, we were looking at whether or not it would go ahead. But I just want to better understand the timeframes. So when I went back and looked at previous documentation, there was, a motion on the table that happened that 2021, that council directs staff to identify planning, infrastructure, transit, transportation, geotechnical, hydrological, environmental, ecological considerations that must be addressed prior to the approval of a secondary plan. And that there'd be reporting back on legal and financial mechanisms to make sure servicing and infrastructure costs would be paid by the proponent. So can I just understand what are the timeframes on all of those reports and what would be the impact of this particular motion that Councillor Menard has put forward to those reports that we're still expecting? Like all the different studies that need to be done and the impact of this motion on any of those reports.
Before we could move to detailed design and construction of the infrastructure, the Taywin SUC related infrastructure, we need to do an environmental assessment and functional design. And so we could amend the scope of work to consider a scenario where Taywin is not included. It may take a little more time to complete that, but there may be other issues that determine the length of study period. So I don't think the impact would be that big in terms of the time frame required to analyze that.
Okay, so it wouldn't be a big impact you don't think?
From a timing perspective, a few months, it's difficult to say. We'd have to assess that.
Mr. Rogers is speaking about the incremental time for the environmental assessment to be completed with the addition of another option. I think the beginning of your question is perhaps better answered by Royce about the timing of that long list of studies that are necessary for attainment.
Yeah, both pieces, please. Yeah, thanks.
So, Mr. Chair, that the motion is an option for Taywin to not proceed, so it all would also depend on what the outcome of the EA is. If that option is enacted, it would be very difficult to therefore then proceed with the other studies for Taywin if there's no trunk line feeding Taywin.
So this piece would have to go first before any of those studies were undertaken.
Thank you, Chair. Studies are currently underway. Some of them are being done, they're being led by the Taywin Group at their own risk. They understand that there's a normal order, and if they're going out of order, it's at their own risk.
So, so there would be no impact to those studies by this change on this particular study? That's what I need to understand.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I misunderstood the question. So there are studies right now that are currently underway for Taywin itself, within Taywin. So those studies would not be impacted in terms of timing with the motion.
So, but the study would potentially impact our assessment that we need to do by, but we don't know the time frame, but we don't expect it to be much. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Good questions. Councillor Johnson, take us home.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So, I just wanted to express, as a new councillor, my discomfort with this situation. I appreciate immensely, thank you. I appreciate immensely, that veteran councillors are also feeling uncomfortable with this situation. So, I don't mean to detract and I don't mean to debate. But as a new councillor, the idea of the urban expansion and where the lands are and how we're going to meet the very ambitious official plan was not something I got to consider. And so here we are. And we are now trying to figure out what is the most affordable and best decision, as people have said, scoping out, capacity for many, many generations to come. And I represent Nepean. And Nepean is a very proud and has a very long memory of their pay-as-you-go life. And so for my neighbors who are feeling anxious even about the intensification that is coming to their neighborhoods, the idea of accepting that intensification as well as having to potentially pay for one could assume is a very expensive, and to some of my council colleagues, we don't know the other things, but a very expensive solution to our urban expansion needs. It's going to be a tough pill for them to swallow. And so for those reasons, I will support the Menard motion. And I was also intrigued by the Luloff amendment because, again, having very little information about what the trade-offs are and what the jigsaw pieces are in this equation means that I don't necessarily feel like I get to make the best decisions for my residents. So, I don't necessarily disagree with the idea that we need to expand out. And, we have colleagues here that are saying, bringing in market forces, and I would agree. The market forces suggest that people do want single-family homes that are going to be in an expansion area. And so I do support a balanced approach. I do. I know that probably is hard to imagine, but I do. I think that in order to, smooth out our intensification goals within the Greenbelt, we may have to balance that with some expansion. But I think I just remain concerned about where that expansion might be. And so I will respectfully state my discomfort with the situation right now. And I will support the Menard motion because I think it's one of the closest things we can get to having more information on the table where there isn't any. And so I will support that in the ambition of transparency and sound decision-making. So I just wanted to make sure that was on the table. I think we've got a lot of plans in front of us right now. We've got an asset management plan that shows a $3 billion problem we need to solve. We have a transit problem that's going to be $6.6 billion to solve. We have development charges that are serving more debt than ever before. We have a landfill problem. We have a lot of problems. And I was elected to make hard decisions. And so this is another one. And so I'm going to aim for more information as opposed to less. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Johnson. I don't see any further questions of staff. I'll just pose, I guess, a couple of my own. What financial commitments are we making today?
We aren't making any financial commitments today.
What are the future votes at which we will be making financial commitments?
So the next time would be as part of the DC background study, which I believe is planned for the fall. There will be an affordability model that is associated with that, not a full long-range financial plan, but an affordability model. There will be a long-range financial plan that is aligned with the asset management plans and the transportation master plan that will be coming to council in Q2 2025.
Okay. I believe the EAs for any of this proposed infrastructure will also have to come to council. Is that for a vote or is that just for update?
It's for approval, Chair, that's correct. They will come to council for approval.
For approval, okay. And that's for all of the infrastructure projects, the ones that require EAs anyways, that are in the IMP?
That's correct, Chair. Those that will require an EA.
Okay. If we pass this IMP today, and a motion or a report were to come forward to remove Taywin from the urban boundary expansion, that would presumably kick off a process, I think I heard Mr. Fu say, of replacing that land somewhere else in order for us to maintain our provincially required 15-year land supply. Is that, have I got that roughly right?
So that's one component, but also to just complete our picture to 2046, which is beyond 15 years.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
So the 15-year land supply is part of the picture, but it would also be more to complete our needs, our projected needs to 2046 as well.
Okay. So one of the questions I don't know the answer to it, one of the criticisms of oversizing the pipe to the Taywin lands is that it will then make further urban expansion more attractive. Otherwise, it would be a cost that we would not recover. Is there any difference in expanding around the Taywin lands versus expanding somewhere else in terms of the magnitude of cost? I don't know if it's clear what I'm getting at there. If we expand around Stittsville, or we expand around Orleans, or we expand around Taywin, does it make a difference in the larger financial picture of the city?
It's difficult to speculate, Chair. We wouldn't have the information because we haven't done the analysis. The reason why there's significant post-period capacity costs associated with Taywin is because we saw potential there in terms of land use, the lack of agricultural lands surrounding Taywin compared to other areas of the city. But if you were to put Taywin somewhere else, ignoring those land use issues, there could very well be other significant costs that arise, but we haven't done that analysis.
Okay, that's interesting. I appreciate that answer. Those were my questions, but we've got some further questions for you from other members. So let's get those. Vice Chair Carr.
Hi, thanks very much, Chair. I have to admit, I don't know if it's the quantity of information or having to go back and try to understand this better, but I am struggling quite a bit to, with the new information that's come out today, with the fact that the motion is new on the table today, and lots of discussions, and I echo my colleague, Councillor Johnson's points as well. Is there any opportunity to defer this vote to council so that we have time to better understand what's in front of us? Does this vote have to be taken with a vote today, or can it be deferred to council?
So this can be referred to council without recommendation. If you wanted to make a motion, that would be in order. Could I ask how significant is the additional volume of information that you might need in order to be able to make a decision? Because there were, obviously a number of briefings, but it is a complex decision.
I'm not referring to the actual report with the recommendations. I'm referring to the motion that was put forward by.
Oh, I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
misunderstood. Yes, there is an opportunity to refer the Menard motion without recommendation to council.
Okay, is it possible to do that? Like,
It would be a referral motion that you would make. We'd vote on it immediately. So if you want to do that, now's your opportunity.
okay, well, I would like to put that forward.
Okay. So colleagues, we have a motion to refer the Menard motion to council. Does anyone want to ask questions or debate on that topic alone? Councillor Menard?
I was just going to wrap up on the motion originally. So I was going to wrap up on it.
Yeah.
So.
So no debate on referral. In that case, I'll ask Councillor Kelly. But we have a Councillor Kelly. It gets very confusing. Kelly,
Well, sorry, Chair, I want to know, I guess, from councillors, what is the information that they don't understand or are looking for before council? This is a very simple motion that we had on the table today that was staff produced based on some discussion about some concerns with regard to the cost and outlay with other communities nearby. And so staff had explained that as part of the EA, this is the right time to ask those questions to get more information. So I guess I'm asking the mover of the referral, what information do you not have about that motion that you need more of to make a decision prior to council? What is it that we're
Do you want to
asking
answer
for?
that question now, Vice Chair Carr?
Or someone else, if anybody has a question about it. I think it's fairly straightforward, is it not?
I just need time to understand the implications of it on staff time, what it means in terms of just looking at the one community, or Councillor Luloff had a motion to look at other communities. I personally haven't been able to absorb what all that would be and the implications, because I just can't think that fast.
Okay. Councillor Devine, you're next on the speakers list on referral.
Yeah, just speaking to referral, from what I understand, from what I heard from staff, I know that when staff were asked for their position on the Luloff amendment to the Menard motion, they made it clear that the scope of work involved in that would be significant. Staff did not express such a concern about the work involved with the Menard motion. So I'm not sure, with respect to the mover, or with respect to Councillor Carr, I'm not sure if there's a great deal of work being imposed on staff with this motion. I'm also, I'm always usually concerned that we've had the fulsome debate here. We've heard all the arguments for. By deferring it to councillors, we may lose the benefits of having had that debate. So I would prefer that we vote on the motion here at committee.
Thank you very much, Councillor Devine. There are no further speakers on referral. I'll ask for yeas and nays on that, please. So if you would like to delay your vote on Councillor Menard's motion, vote yes to referral. If you'd like to vote on Councillor Menard's motion today, vote no on referral.
Councillor Brockington, Councillor Brown,
No.
Councillor Curry,
No.
Councillor Devine,
No.
Councillor Hill,
No.
Councillor Johnson,
No.
Councillor Kavanagh,
No.
Councillor Kelly, Councillor King,
No.
Councillor Kitts,
Yes.
Councillor Lowe,
No.
Councillor Luloff,
No.
Councillor Tierney,
No.
Councillor Troster, No. Councillor DeRuse,
No.
Vice Chair Carr,
Yes.
Vice Chair Gower,
No.
Chair Menard,
No.
and Chair Leeper.
No.
15 no, yay, sorry, 15 nays, 2 yays.
Okay, so we will deal with the Menard motion today. I don't see any further speakers on the, oh, did you want to wrap up on the main item?
Whenever you're ready, Chair.
Please go ahead.
Okay, thanks so much. So just to wrap up on the motion, I want to make sure that we've got clarification from staff because it seems to be there was some miscommunication around Councillor Carr's questions previously and who was answering what. What is involved with asking this extra question as part of the EA? Does it disrupt your work in any fundamental way? Are there added costs, or is it just a question as part of the EA that you're putting forward? If you can just please confirm that piece of information.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is a small amount relatively to the level of effort to complete an environmental assessment. It would be a small amount to consider additional options as described in your motion.
And is an EA the proper time to be considering more information for council to come in front of us? Is that the right time to do that in a normal course of action for these types of projects?
Mr. Chair, we believe the environmental assessment process is an opportune time because it does come to council. There will be full transparency on all of the options reviewed, assessed against several criteria, many criteria, and it'll be a full menu of facts and findings that council could consider before approving the EA and what the recommended preferred option would be.
Okay, thanks. I think it's obviously prudent, Chair, to get more information for council when requested, when there is concern for new councillors, for councillors that have been returning. I do want to address a couple of comments that were made. The province, in their comments back to the city, did have critical concerns about Taywin when the official plan was sent to them. They did send back critical comments in their questioning of when we sent this. Obviously, staff didn't initially support this going in and had concerns and said they wanted to come back in 5 years to do exactly what we're talking about, to get more information. And so I think, this is an important staff suggestion that we do it as part of the EA and not as some separate vote. And it's requesting more information at the end of the day. And so I think, Chair, it's reasonable. And this is a lot of money we're spending on the IMP, a lot of money on Taywin. I think it behooves us to make sure we're doing that with eyes wide open. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair Menard. There are no further speakers on the speakers list. We're going to take 3 votes, the first of which is going to be on the technical motion that Chair or Vice Chair Gower put forward. Then we're going to vote on the amending motion from Councillor Menard, and then we'll vote on the main item as amended or not by the outcome of the Menard vote. On the technical motion, is that carried? Thank you. Could I get yeas and nays on the Menard motion, please?
Councillor Brown?
No.
Councillor Curry?
No.
Councillor Devine?
Yes.
Councillor Hill?
No.
Councillor Johnson?
Yes.
Councillor Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Councillor Kelly? Councillor King?
Yes.
Councillor Kitts?
No.
Councillor Lowe?
No.
Councillor Luloff?
No.
Councillor Tierney?
No.
Councillor Troster?
Yes.
Councillor DeRose?
No.
Vice Chair Carr?
Yes.
Vice Chair Gower?
No.
Chair Menard?
Yes?
Chair Leeper?
Yes.
8 yeas, 8 nays.
Thank you very much. So the motion fails. The main motion then is unamended. We'll vote on that. Is that just carried? Carried. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to staff for the work that you've done on the IMP. We're in a very busy time of council. We've done the OP, which means that now we have to do new zoning, new transportation, new infrastructure, new parks. This is a very busy term at council, and we appreciate your advice and help as we navigate our way through it. Thank you. Colleagues, thank you very much for a good meeting. And, right, I've got a couple of inquiries. Thank you very much for your amenability. Is that the right word? To hearing inquiries today. These obviously will not come to the next joint meeting of Planning and Environment because that could be like 6 years from now. Councillor Johnson, you got an inquiry?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Stormwater tree trenches are structures built to contain an adequate volume of continuous growing media to support tree growth to maturity under a paved boulevard, which may include soil cells, modular systems designed to be filled with growing medium to tree rooting while supporting the loads from the surface above. Ooh, there's some pedestrian infrastructure, vehicles, etc. And tree trenches can be designed and sized to promote stormwater benefits. The City of Ottawa is currently implementing a pilot stormwater tree cell installation in the Glebe Avenue Integrated Renewal Project, which will consist of an underground soil support system to provide adequate soil volume for tree health and diversion of stormwater runoff to provide hydration for the trees. And the Urban Forest Management Plan provides direction to develop tree planting guidelines for planting in hardscapes, including planting trees using soil cell technologies, as well as the City of Ottawa is developing LID low impact development guidelines, including design requirements, standard drawings, and specifications for tree branches. 1, what are the internal and external funding opportunities to support the incorporation of more tree trenches in future road designs? Can development charges support tree trenches? And how can rate and tax budgets from infrastructure and forestry be made complementary? 2, how is the staff measuring the long-term success and life cycle costs of tree trenches, including in the context of green asset management and reporting requirements? 3, what barriers exist to mainstreaming tree trenching? Thank you.
Great inquiry. Councillor Devine, I believe you have an inquiry as well.
Thank you, Chair. So this inquiry is on the issue of green procurement. Canada has been strongly engaged in the effort to decarbonize our cement and concrete sector. The National Research Council is engaged in cutting-edge research, and the federal government has made it a priority as per the roadmap to net zero carbon concrete by 2050. The development of lower carbon or green cement is an active industry in the R&D sector. It is also broadly recognized that green procurement is a powerful lever to drive the decarbonization of construction materials. The Federal Standard on Embodied Carbon in Construction 2022, which generally targets carbon embodied in concrete, is already in effect and applies to federal procurements for projects valued at $10 million or more and which are expected to use more than 100 cubic meters of ready-mixed concrete. This minimum threshold will be reduced to $5 million projects after 2024. Responding to climate change, enabling infrastructure to support intensification, and pursuing affordability and sustainability are key principles guiding the City of Ottawa's Infrastructure Master Plan's design and implementation. But beyond new infrastructure, as much, if not more, concrete is used in renewal projects as it is in growth-related projects. One of the enabling projects in the City of Ottawa's Climate Change Master Plan is to explore carbon sequestration methods and the role of green infrastructure. And starting in 2022, the City has also required a climate lens for reporting on all capital projects. The 3 questions are: 1, which City of Ottawa process for establishing and reviewing standards and guidelines for quality and testing of materials would be the appropriate place for consideration of new productions and materials such as lower carbon cement? 2, how does the City of Ottawa's Infrastructure and Water Services Department currently ensure that best practices in green building standards are deployed in municipal infrastructure construction projects? And 3, what are some of the current green procurement tools and best practices used by federal government as well as Canadian municipalities that the City of Ottawa could potentially deploy towards lowering the embodied carbon content of municipal infrastructure projects? Thank you, Chair.
Great inquiry. Councillors, we're adjourned. Thank you.